to order for Tuesday, September 5th, 2017 at 6 p.m. First on our agenda tonight is the City Council vacancy, oath of office. Who's?
Cindy.
It's your show. Can I? Oh. We've always had the recorder do it.
Traditionally, we've had the mayor do it as kind of the ceremonial aspect of your position. Officially, it's the city recorder that administers the oath of office. But you're welcome to do it. We've had the mayor do it in the past with the city recorder just kind of doing it off on the side. But
let's do the real deal. Make it official. Family's here for that. So last week we did interviews with some candidates. The council has chosen to fill the vacancy for Councilman Podeska with Ryan Podeska, and tonight we'll swear him in and then have him jump right into the work.
Remember, Cindy, into the microphone and nice and loud.
I, Ryan Podeska, solemnly swear or obey the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Utah. I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
Yes, you don't get to hide down there. Welcome and thank you. Thanks those who are in attendance to support Ryan in this. It is a lot of work, so congratulations and condolences, and anybody who's got to work with Mark. No, it's great. Thank you. We will move on to the City Council work session. The first item. We'll start with the Fox Hollow commercial. Doug Towler's the applicant, 3100 South Redwood Road.
Okay, I'll give a brief description of what the applicant is requesting, and the applicant also has a small presentation. In the Fox Hollow neighborhood, there's a master development agreement that requires 20 acres of commercial zoning within neighborhood 4. 5 of that is to be regional commercial, and 15 of that is to be neighborhood commercial. The applicant is asking to move a portion of that commercial west within the Fox Hollow development and west of the future Foothill Boulevard or Mountain View Corridor alignment. What they have provided is some information from Zions Public Finance, which is their consultant on this particular topic, and they've provided some information indicating that based on projected populations within a half a mile, 1 mile, and 3 miles, they would like to request moving 14 acres of the required commercial to the west of the project along the Foothill Boulevard alignment, and they believe that the location along Redwood Road doesn't necessarily support 20 acres of commercial. However, that is obviously up for discussion, and then their consultant is here with a small presentation. I'll pull that up.
Hello, I'm Matt Scott with SCP Fox Hollow. Doug wasn't able to make it here this evening. Anyways, after our last discussion about talking about moving the commercial we thought it might be best to consult a professional, and so we sought out the city's consultant on commercial real estate to get professional opinion about the location for the commercial in this area. And so we brought him here tonight to kind of help talk about that.
Great.
Oh, that's fine.
So I can see this a little better. This is not on. It's Benj, B-E-N-J, Becker, B-E-C-K-E-R. And I just want to make it clear, I have not been hired by the developer or the property owners. They had heard a presentation that we made in coordination with Logan Simpson, who was working on part of your general plan, or on your general plan, and asked us to take a look, specifically me, to take a look at commercial uses and the need for commercial in this area. So I don't have really a dog in this fight. I really just want to give an honest answer as to where I think commercial makes the most sense in this area. First of all, I just wanted to back up real quickly and show you what we believe that retailers want, what's specific or necessary for them when they look at sites. The first is they heavily look at traffic counts, specifically within a 0.5, a 1, and a 3 mile radii. They want to know daytime traffic counts. They want to know when traffic is at its busiest points. Then the second criteria for retailers picking a site is population density. In those same radii, how much, what's the population that you have, not only existing, but also what is proposed? What are the proposed number of housing units in the area? What will population be like in 10, 20 years? And then median incomes in those same type radii. They want to see, is there disposable income? That determines the type of retailer that will go to an area. We can go to the next slide. If those three criteria are met or not met, sometimes retailers will look at something different and they'll say, well, there might not be the population that lives here, but there may be a daytime population. This makes sense for portions of Lehigh where they don't have the homes right there, but they have all the businesses. They have office parks, business parks that create a significant daytime need for retail. Or if you have destination locations, people are driving to a place, it creates unusual amounts of traffic during select times. These are things that retailers might want. So when we looked at the sites on Redwood Road, 20 acres in typical retail building fashion would result in about 220,000 square feet of retail. That is a significant amount of retail space. If you think of the Smith's development that you have that has been going on, Pioneer Crossing, it's really a significant size, 220,000 square feet of development. If you want to create that type of retail complex, you've got to have significant population within those 0.5 and 1 point and 3 point mile radii, or notable traffic. We can go on to the next slide there. You'll see that the population, or excuse me, the population and the traffic counts on Redwood Road are inferior to what is proposed for Foothill Boulevard. We think that some minimal retail could work on Redwood Road in this specific area, but for future planning, that greater impact, not only to your citizens, but also to you as a community, based on the sales tax dollars that you'll achieve, would be made off of additional retail on Foothill. If you look at this how location of retail impacts you specifically as a city, it obviously drives other development. Retailers are looking for critical mass, they're looking for groupings. And then here's just an example. If a retailer comes in and is able to do $125 per square foot in retail sales, it's not very significant, but it is what you would anticipate for something like on Redwood Road in that area that does not have a lot of traffic or a lot of population. Fiscal impacts to the city, this is what obviously helps direct some of your budget and your ability to make decisions for the city, would be roughly $12,000 to $14,000 per acre. But if you can get that same retailer in a different location who is doing more sales per square foot because of greater traffic, greater population density, at just $200 per square foot in retail sales. Now, Costco does $800 a square foot in some locations, just to give you the difference. Shopko's, more like $70 to $90 a square foot. A Walgreens would be 250, 300. So that kind of gives you the range of what these tenants would be like. Fiscal impacts to the city are roughly $19,000 to $20,000 per acre. So you can see there the potential between, you know, $6,000 to $7,000 more income to you as a city per acre if that retailer is thriving and doing well. And that ultimately obviously would be a goal for you, and that it would allow you to have additional funds for parks, police officers, and whatnot. Retail sites with limited traffic counts, low population densities will struggle to generate sales per square foot. It's just proven wherever that if you don't have the visibility and exposure from traffic, retail will suffer. And ultimately, it's you and the citizens that lose out on that lost revenue. If we could go to just the last slide. This is, again, back to the development on Redwood Road, the proposed 20 acres at about 220,000 square feet. These are some other developments throughout the area, and the 1 mile populations, the 1 mile households, and the traffic counts that are these centers. Now, some of them are significantly larger, some of them are a little bit smaller, but retail centers that kind of within that 100,000, 200,000 square feet. We use a couple of other examples to show how far retail centers need to pull from. The subject site, being this property on Redwood Road, shows traffic counts at much lower than this. And where UDOT is actually counting those traffic counts is higher north on Redwood Road. And population is pretty limited within that 1 mile radius. It's just the recommendation of, my recommendation that you really focus your retail on areas where you're going to have higher visibility and exposure, create an environment where the retailers can thrive and prosper, and thereby you as a city have an opportunity to gain greater sales tax dollars, places that can generate better retail sales traffic. The site on Redwood Road obviously will have some potential for retail, but at 220,000 square feet, it looks to be significantly down the road. Any questions?
Does this take into account, because you mentioned destinations, we have the city marina, which is the only access to the lake for basically anybody north of Linden. Did you take that into account as far as the traffic counts? And
We did. We tried to take everything we thought was feasible from fortunately having the knowledge of your recent general plan, working with Logan Simpson on that, looking at potential plan connections, the growth that MAG and UDOT anticipate in terms of highway connections, where you're going to see traffic flows, what attractions you might have, what planned developments that would create increases in traffic, and yes, and I don't want to say that we undersold the marina, but we looked at what we thought would be potential traffic events, the number of events at the marina, what could really drive people. So yes, we did consider that.
And my other question, I guess, is I guess just trying to understand how something up by Foothill differs appreciably from something just down the hill at Redwood. Why is all of a sudden Foothill so attractive when, I mean, it's basically just another big road running through our city that you're gonna have the same people passing, it's just which road they're gonna be driving on.
I think the main thing is traffic counts, the proposed planned traffic counts that you're going to create this visibility and exposure. And if you're a retailer, that's key to you. If you are a Chubby's sandwich shop or whatever it may be, I just ate that. I actually feel nervous about my onion breath. But if you that's a big deal to you for people to know your location, to see your sign, to understand which street you're on. That's probably the biggest driver in this, is those planned increase in traffic counts.
Okay, thank you.
Not specifically on the counts, I understand that. I think that there are other things that they're not considering, and specifically towards zoning and the timing of the zoning. So I don't know if you want to address that now or after.
Back after we asked about the council. Councilman Wilden?
What was your time horizon you were looking at? Was it 5, 10 years that you were out modeling, or 20?
That's a good question. So we looked at obviously looked at current traffic counts. We took what UDOT anticipates for 10 years. We looked at planned development that we think can occur within the next 10 to 15 years. We usually try to err on the side of conservatism. If you say you've got 4,000 planned housing units you think are going to go in the next 15 years, we think 2,000, just to err more on the side of let's be cautious.
Well, and that is a good point, but I think one thing to keep in consideration with our city is we've been saying, hey, we're planning on 500 units and getting like 1,000. We're actually, so from our perspective, we've under-projected growth in our city, so I kind of like to look at it the other way. And I did have one question, if you could go back a slide or two.
Just while just going back on that slide, I think that's a great point. We look at your historical absorption, your historical permits, and how many homes have actually happened, and project going off that forward as well as your projections. So it's not like that we've consistently tried to undercut. We've tried to take actuals and then going forward with what's happened. But go ahead on your next question, sir.
No, and I appreciate the insight. Just that last statement, city and its citizens ultimately lose out on cost revenue. What is that trying to say there? I mean,
just that if retail is put in the wrong spots, then you get, and I have a perfect example of living in Bountiful. Bountiful is really poorly designed for retail. If retail is put in the wrong spots, that retail suffers. You're getting the $125 per square foot in retail sales as opposed to the $200.
So
and
I guess the study, just to make sure I understand, and I guess this goes back to Councilman Porter's question, is we're saying that if we put it up on Foothill Boulevard, at least a certain percentage, that it'll draw in more?
And that's what we believe, based on what retailers want in terms of primarily traffic counts and the potential for increased population and these critical massings, grouping of retail, that retail has a better chance of surviving and thriving on Foothill as opposed to Redwood Road. If the projections that UDOT has made, if the road alignment, if that goes forward as planned and anticipated.
No, and I appreciate kind of the information you're giving. We had someone here presenting a UDOT model. They projected on a very small road 10,000 cars a day, which, in the conversation with them, an engineer, their model is significantly flawed. And if I was reviewing their models as I do for model risk management, they would have received a failing grade on what they're doing. So I'm not trying to discount anything you're saying, and I know you're using the tools that are available, and I appreciate that information. I just want the residents as well as the council to know where I'm coming from. It's UDOT counts and the statistical models that they use are significantly flawed. And
well, to your point, they hadn't planned on expanding Redwood for another several years because they didn't think their models didn't show it needing to be expanded, and we've already seen that they're probably not even doing enough as they are now. So their models sometimes leave something to be desired as far as actually forecasting the reality of our city, at least.
And you're not the first to say this, and so I think you're right on. I mean, it's an issue, especially in an area of such significant rapid growth like Saratoga Springs, or Eagle Mountain's dealing with it right now with estimates that have not betrayed them, but have not proven well for them. So,
Mayor and Council, if I could, I think he just mentioned Bountiful, where basically the commercial core was viewed as Highway 89 that runs through that. And let me kind of use that as an example. Highway 89 is kind of that main road that runs pretty much all along the Wasatch Front, like our Redwood Road. And really the power retail locations have been closer to I-15. Now, Foothill is not going to be I-15, but if we take that example and we look out, say, on the west side, and we look at Redwood Road, and we look at places that are going to be more along like 215, the Beltway, or even Mountain View Corridor, which is a lot greener than, say, the 215 corridor. I think the question is fundamentally, do we strategically do ourselves a better advantage by putting some of those nodes up along what will eventually become that 215 belt route, if you would, through that area. Now, it's kicking the can down the road. I think part of what the study is saying is Redwood Road can't sustain that much retail at this moment. And so the question is do we take and say, okay, because we can't sustain it and because it's not going to be a great node at that specific location, do we move that retail node up off of Mountain View Corridor? Well, you're probably all scratching your head saying, well, there's X thousands of cars a day on Redwood Road, and there's 0 cars a day on Foothill Boulevard. Why are we doing it this way? Because, I mean, that's kind of the conversation, and it's future planning. It's that future model, and
See, and this goes to my comment, and I'm going to jump in, sorry, Mayor. This goes to my comment because this is exactly what you said, future planning, but you're treating this like a land use map, and yet you're actually asking us to zone it, and you're asking us to zone it in kind of a bubble format, and that doesn't work. It's technically illegal for us to zone that way. So what you're asking is technically not possible. We've had, and that's the way I know it's technically right like that right now in the development agreement. It's a horrible piece of legal paperwork, and that's not something that we want to continue. We want to make sure that we're always improving things and making them better. So if you were asking this on a land use map, I'd say, hey, yeah, we can do that. I can see that down the road. It might make more sense. But in 10 years, honestly, Foothill Boulevard may not be what Foothill Boulevard is proposed to be even right now. So we just don't know. So to say, hey, we're going to zone this area commercial right now, when you don't know exactly where Foothill Boulevard's going to be and where it could be expanded into Mountain View Corridor or not, depending on, UDOT's latest change of mind. And so this is my problem, is that this is a zoning issue, and what you're asking us to zone is not appropriate.
So to respond to that, so we're not looking to actually zone it right now, and we've been talking with staff about how to do this, because we realize you can't do the bubble zone, that doesn't work. And so we completely understand that. So what we're proposing to do, and we've had some initial talks with Kevin about this to see if this would work, is to leave the sole discretion to the council to be able to rezone it when the time comes. So once Foothill Boulevard is put in the right place, then we can put that zone, that commercial zone, where it should go, as opposed to having 20 acres of commercial in an area that's not going to be supported.
And again, that's a land use map. That's a planning function. That's not a zoning function. You can't say, here's this random 15 acres out here floating that's going to be commercial someplace, and 10 years down the road, some council is going to have the ability to put it any place, because it's not going to work, because the landowners are going to come in and say, well, we want to do this now. Well, we want to build these houses here now. We want to do, and it doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
So, can I go back to what I was
Yes.
saying? So, kind of wrapping up what I was saying is rewinding a little bit. Give me a second to get it in my head. Is, I appreciate the information. There is, for me, and maybe we'll have this conversation a little bit when is the lost revenue or potential lost revenue wouldn't be the only driver for me to transfer some of it. For me, it would be, what is the benefit to the city of allowing some of this transfer, and for me to consider any of it, and I apologize if I'm not, but I'm going anyway, would be a reduction in density. The numbers, I get what's being done with that. It's just a lot of significant unknowns and flaws in the data and analysis, not analysis, but the modeling used behind that does take into account some of the decisions, but for me that's not the sole decision maker, which would be what is the near-term benefit to the city, which would be a reduction in density. Is there more, I should say, or are we having a separate discussion about the zoning and density? Or is it,
At this point, you might as well just say whatever, because work session, I jumped in, so go for it.
okay, so for me, I already talked about, if I were to consider this, I'd like to see a specific reduction in the density, not just movement of houses around. Concern that I have is if you're keeping exactly the same number of units you had before and then just spreading it out over more property, that's a slightly different product, but it's not a reduction in concentrations of home in the same general geographic area. That's kind of where I'm looking at. And this seems a little bit like rinse and repeat. Before I was never like totally comfortable with I think it was brought forth before 14.6 transfer. something like that. I always said if there was a reduction in density, I could get comfortable with a 50-50 split, as well as in talking to, I don't mean to steal his thunder, Councilman Porter, maybe there's some things that we can do through dedications to help narrow in where that road may be, because I know when UDOT or whatever, when they're looking at placements of roads, if there's an existing easement there, according to Kevin, there's a high motivation to put it there. So I think there's some things. Or is that factual, Kevin?
Well, step one is always land acquisition, and if that gets out of the way, it's much easier for UDOT to plan a road if they don't have to worry about the land acquisition. The land acquisition is where they have to go through the eminent domain process oftentimes, and it's always obviously I think a good planning idea to plan that out ahead and acquire the land as we move along, as we make these legislative decisions.
So the answer is yes.
It's more of a planning issue than legal.
And if I could, when I talked to UDOT a few weeks ago, the more planning that we can do like this that will preserve that right of way, the sooner that road will get built. Because it is going to be such a massive project, these kinds of things, if we can get the roadway lined up and you know, we've got Sitla that's going to be coming into the north of this project, and that will allow us to get a rather, you know, large segment of road identified and put into place. And hopefully, you know, as we continue to see developments moving along this corridor, the more of those corridors that we can preserve and actually get land set aside for that, the better off we're going to be.
So one thing I could add that about, you know, related to the eminent domain process, we're hearing from many attorneys that do eminent domain proceedings that it's taking minimum 6 to 9 months, and that's if the decision isn't challenged. So it could be a very lengthy process for UDOT to acquire a road, and where they may be able to get funding right away, that does slow things down.
What I was suggesting is not going down the road of eminent domain. It's working out something with you guys, UDOT, proactively, because then I think we can identify with a very high likelihood this is where the road will be, because maybe there's some ownership or rights for an easement or whatever legal terminology might be there. And I'd like to hear Councilman Podesta's thoughts on it, because he is a resident in this neighborhood, very close to it. If I were living in this neighborhood, I wouldn't mind seeing a reduction in density for some minor transfers. When I say minor, like, I'm not thinking 14, 16, but maybe that's just my opinion. So normally I'm not the chief pontificator, so sorry I've gone on so long.
Councilman Podesta?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for the study, because that gives us data and points to discuss off. I had one question with the study for the 1 mile radius portion there. Just wondering why the center isn't where the commercial is projected to be as far as doing that study. For one, I live just south of that circle. That's part of the HOA that has that commercial in there. And so there's a lot of residents and numbers that would add to that to make that a little more accurate. So right now the center is far north from the proposed commercial site.
That's a good point. I think our guys that do the mapping recognize that as they shifted it around, this was the most beneficial map to you. As it came lower down towards the center, it took in too much vacant land to the south, and the study became a little more skewed. This was an area that I thought was the most maybe representative potential users of the commercial, but we could certainly run the map and right back it.
That goes back, I guess, to a previous question then. Does this study then take into account the future growth?
No.
Because all that vacant land is, some of it's higher density, medium density, so a lot of population in those areas of that, especially within that HOA. So that's where I was kind of looking for, you know, numbers that would fit more to the location there. But to Councilman Wilden's response there, living in that area, I mean, I'd want the residents to have feedback as well. One thought is that having it split somewhat would help with their views out to the lake as far as commercial being there, cutting down on light pollution and so forth. So not having the full 20 acres there is a benefit to that. Having some up on Foothill Boulevard when that's developed, people taking that traffic pattern, I think would need some sort of gas station and sorts up on that road. It'd be more difficult, not difficult, but out of their way to travel down Village Parkway to get to a gas station and then go back up onto Foothill to get home. So I was in favor of doing a split. I didn't like seeing the 7 acre or 6 acre. I'd be more in favor of a 50-50. Just because once we're looking at a full build out, I think both would be used evenly between those two.
So just so I understand, so a 50-50, 10 acres, 10 acre split, and both we're talking about a 20 acre split. Is that what we're?
Yeah, and one of the other reasons why I was kind of liking the idea of some commercial being up there on Foothill Boulevard is I believe it's neighborhood 17 in that HOA that has a big flat area that I think would be a prime spot for potential business park. And so if they had commercial up there with the business park, a potential one, that could also service their needs in that area as well. Other than that, I had another concern about with transferring that up there, it being more costly for UDOT to acquire the land. So I'd want to find ways that, if that was to happen, find ways that it wouldn't cost UDOT more, because that's just more of our money as taxpayers. That's about all the comments I had on that.
Councilmember Conver.
First off, I'd like to apologize for being late. I had a family emergency and then got stuck in traffic, but well aware of this topic. It's not like I really missed too much getting here a little late today, since I feel like this is the every 3 months. We even got to talk about it on my birthday back on February 7th. And that's what I went and did. I thought, why am I rehashing this? Because sometimes this is a trick that developers use. They just keep bringing it back, hoping that you might forget. So I went back and read all of our minutes and all of our notes really closely. And a couple of things that really stood out to me was actually the city manager, Mark Christensen's comments about the viability and this isn't really the, investors, Caldwell Banker, all these different comments, but really what he's getting to is that maybe it's not the right time to build. Well, I've actually been listening to residents quite a bit right now, and a lot of residents actually would like to see it stay open until it's viable. They're all asking for us to put moratorium on building and development, and so we can't do that. And so I don't know why we're twisting and changing so much to force a product maybe that isn't viable yet. Maybe it should stay open land for 5 years, 7 years longer until Redwood Road is wide down and Foothill maybe has started, and then it becomes multi-family housing. Again, Mark says this is probably not the best location for that kind of product to be made. I absolutely would support, obviously, the area. And Councilman Wilden, I think your arguments are strong, at least a 50-50 split, but I just throw it out there, why are we trying so hard to force something when maybe it's not the right time? And I'm not a soothsayer or anything, but I could probably guess in 10 years, they're going to be coming back asking for more commercial acreage up by Foothill and everything they have here. It just seems like we're twisting and forcing a square in a round hole. And I just would rather, we have had this in the plans for a long time. When they bought what they were getting, when they went through all the process, they were very much aware of what rights they had, what entitlements they had. And so I would just put it to the council that maybe they either make it work with what they were given and let them try and figure it out. And if it's not the right time, then it's not the right time. And I personally think that would actually be good for the congestion in the south, to minimize even the 300 or 400 cars that might go south to this area, your little 3 mile, which we drive, or 1 mile. We drive much more than that in Saratoga Springs. And our retail circles, you can ask our public relations director, are much larger just because people are used to driving much further for things. But the cars driving south and then having to go back north will just add to more traffic when maybe this isn't the right time, especially in the next 2 to 3 years as we're dealing with all of the construction happening. So that would just sort of be my arguments, and really if you go back, and I'm sure you guys did because I often like to remember what I said, and I was reading some of your comments and even your late father's comments. He wasn't a real fan either of this, and Councilwoman Barch, I think you probably had some of the less emotional, more factual than any of us, and it was just like boom, 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 right down the list. Why are we even doing this? And so I want to come back to that. Why are we trying to make something fit when we don't have to?
I think Councilman Pedesca's comments about the potential for even a business park and things like that up against Foothill Boulevard, Mountain View Corridor eventually, we just don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen in 10 years. It doesn't make sense right now to move that. If in 10 years, then it's still not viable along, Redwood, and only 5 acres is developed because all they've done is put a gas station in, which I know they want to put in right now. Then, we want to look up there, and I can easily foresee more than 20 acres because they do want to put some kind of a little business office area as well as some commercial. My other concern about it is that was the area that our larger lots were supposed to be in for Fox Hollow. And if we put this larger commercial in, commercial always wants higher density housing around it to feed more more rooftops, right? Always. So again, we're going to lose all of our lower density, our larger lots.
And thank you for restating, because that was one of your minute items that you pointed out, and just bringing that back up again. So I just throw that out there. Sometimes I think we feel like we have to act, when in fact, Kevin often tells us we don't, especially when it comes to something like this. This is a decision that we do not have to do, and we don't have to make it work. And it's not like we're trying to take something away. That's not a taking here. This is what you have, run with it. So that's just my last thought. Thank you.
Really quick before we go, I know myself and the council members, the HOA presidents here, Tanya, do you have something you'd like to say on the HOA's behalf?
So from the perspective
You
of
pull the mic down so they can hear you on.
Okay. Tanya Parker. I'm the Villages at Saratoga Springs HOA president. So from the residents' perspective, the split actually would make more sense, just because that land has sat there empty for so long, and if any development, any residential development were to take place on the back side, on the west side of neighborhood 4, which that's where the commercial is proposed, right? You're basically looking at a continuing running path, right along Redwood Road. Then you're going to have acres of weeds and dirt for years to come, and then in the back of it you're going to have housing. So until that commercial gets filled in between, it's basically going to be unused, undeveloped land for years to come. So that being said, the thought behind of splitting the commercial 50-50 or whatever the percentage would be is the fact that you're still giving the necessities that residents are asking for, right? Because it is true that they're asking for some commercial, just not all of the commercial all at once, right? So the thought behind it was, okay, let's give people what they want now along Redwood Road, and let's save some for later when the needs are there along Foothills Boulevard, because the Foothills Boulevard is not going to be developed until obviously there's a need for it, right? Which means that there's going to be a higher population in that area alone, along with south, north, you name it. So that was the idea behind the split. I understand logistics behind it may not be as easy as we would like it to be, but from the residents' perspective, we would hate to see another parcel of our land, of our HOA, sat there and used and undeveloped for years and years to come, just because the agreement couldn't be reached at this point. So that's kind of our input. as an HOA, but again, we're gonna try to do best with what we're given, as we have been doing in our HOA. Again, I would just like that you guys kind of consider that as the future growth, not necessarily putting all eggs in one basket and just along Redwood Road in that one section, but potentially at least leaving it up to, you know, the residence development later on, the possibility to possibly moving some of that up to Foothills to feed that future business park, to allow some of that future movement if possible.
Can I ask a quick clarification?
Absolutely.
Would the neighborhood, the HOA, be okay if you had the commercial and then more commercial at the top, so that, because it gets to the point, and I think Councilwoman Barch makes this comment in here as well, if you get too small of an acreage, it really limits on what you can even do, and it makes it very difficult to actually have anything of value in the development. So let's say there was still just that 20 acres, and then up above there was another 10, 15 acres on Foothill. Would that be a problem, having both? Or
To be honest with you, I really don't see us ever getting enough rooftops to support that volume. Because, I mean, if you think about it, they're not going to put Walmart up there. They're not going to put anything larger up there. So it's going to be small retail stores.
Well, business park as well.
Business parks, exactly. So it's
But business parks take a lot of acreage. That's what we're getting at.
right, but that's a whole separate neighborhood, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Neighborhood 7 up by Foothill Boulevard.
Correct,
is where-
correct.
On
So it's a
Foothill
whole
Boulevard.
separate
Yeah.
entity. Yeah, and then the commercial that we're talking about is really just along the Foothill Boulevard. So I don't believe the acreage, the 20 acres of commercial would increase.
This is their
correct?
argument, but they also don't know that we have applications for 3 more neighborhoods south of Lake Mountain. See, we have a lot of more development that's coming, and so they don't always take into account, like,
Sure.
we have people who are expressing interest, thousands of rooftops even further south. And so I think, and I want to support obviously what the HOA. My other question is I'm hearing more complaints about all of the growth and all of the homes, and so the HOA, even though, because you said you would have this undeveloped land, but that's what I'm hearing the majority of people, especially in the South, want to see is more undeveloped land. So I'm getting a mixed message. You're saying you want to see all these rooftops in your neighborhood, but I'm hearing people saying they want to have view corridors and leave it open, and how come you can't stop developers from building?
Of course. So there's a definitely difference between simply undeveloped and something that's planned to be open and, you know, view corridors and things like that.
Well, most of it down there is undeveloped, right? Just
Well,
weeds
yeah,
and stuff.
yeah, but it's I mean, if the things are meant to go in, it's nicer for things to actually happen instead of sitting there and accumulate everybody's trash and just
'Kay.
being undeveloped. Does that make sense? There's a difference between a planned open space and then forgotten undeveloped space that's been sitting there and neglected for years.
Because along the golf course, all that is just dry grass, and it's going to be like that forever. It's never developed, right? It's grass from the green golf course, and then just those weeds and the native.
Native, yes, we know.
But all along
about
there is native, and so, and I have people, I've had thousands over the years tell me that they wish that we just had more of that native open space and don't develop. And so I just was curious what your thoughts were, so thank you.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate you saying that, because these are the same people that on the same breath they say, and now get me the, you know, all these businesses and, you
Yep.
know, so it really depends on
So that's
who
my argument.
we
Why
listen to.
are we
Yeah.
taking acreage away that's going to be 20 years out
Sure.
for development for business? So that's the thing, because Foothill's 15 years out. So thank you. I appreciate the clarification.
Yeah, if I could, how does the HOA perceive the down zone? Because part of the proposal is to take the R12 zoning and downgrade that to, what was that, Sarah, an R7? An R9. How do you feel as an HOA about that potential down zone and change in product type, which prominently would be in neighborhood 4?
So you're referring to neighborhood 4, is that correct? So right now the density is 12. 15. Yeah, I was going to say, I think, yeah, 15 sounds more correct. Exactly. Okay. So they're proposing to reduce the density. Is that correct?
9.
To 9, yes. And of course, we open that with open arms, because that helps to address some of the concerns that we're squeezing in every last square foot of every piece of land that we own. And we're losing our larger lots to these tiny little small lots. So that that portion, but I don't believe that is being discussed at this point, correct? Maybe that's part of the discussion? Okay.
Yeah, that's part of the proposal, if I understand it correctly, is that there would be this reduction in density in neighborhood 4, and in exchange for that, they would then be, you know, partially transferring the commercial density up to the top. And so there's, I mean, that's part of the conversation. And the R15 is, I believe, the most dense zoning that you have in
Correct,
that
HOA.
subdivision.
Yes, absolutely, yeah, by far. Yes, of course, as an HOA, we open lower density with open arms. The higher density creates more and more issues. We don't, you know, as you know, in the south, we don't really have infrastructure, really, anything from water to the road to parking to, you name it, even open space. So the reduction in density is an absolute must for us. To be honest with you, the movement of some of the commercial made sense to us as well. I understand you guys have to think on bigger picture, and we don't know of all the developments happening south. I understand some developments have been in the works for years and nothing's happened since then. Again, how do we predict how soon that will happen? And what I would hate is for all the commercial to come about and then sit empty and become a ghost town. So, anyway, thank you. Any other
Are
questions?
there any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Councilman Porter, how to follow up?
Yeah, well, I kind of spoke to the traffic study and the viability study, but didn't really speak to some of the other issues surrounding this discussion, so I just wanted to weigh in on those. And a lot of them have already been hit on, so I'll hit them really lightly. But, you know, to both Councilman Wilden and Councilman McComber's points, you know, Councilman McComber was asking why now, why are we doing anything? We don't have to do anything, we can just leave it the way it is. You know, for me to consider, you know, doing this, because it is to your benefit, you know, you guys are concerned that it's not viable, and so you're looking for more land to put houses on. You want some of, you know, the discussions aren't separate from each other, because any reduction in the commercial area on Redwood is an increase in residential development area. So, so if we're going to pursue anything, why would we do something right now? It, you know, in my mind, the reduction in density is, you know, being able to lock that in is something that is a net benefit to the city. That's something that our residents have been very clear that they want, is reductions in density. And so this is an opportunity to take advantage of that, as well as was mentioned by Councilman Wilden, the right-of-way. If we were able to secure a definitive right-of-way, you know, an actual parcel up where Foothill will eventually go, I think that would not only address some of the concerns about where we're going to put the commercial zone, because we can just put the commercial zone adjacent to that easement, but it would also help us when dealing with UDOT, as far as saying, look, this is this land. They're not going to have to come in and pay regional commercial rates for the land because it's been dedicated to the city and is ready for them to use. But I'm kind of the other issue with the study, and you know, we looked at this with staff earlier in the week or last week, and I did have some questions about why the center was there, because there are some extremely large developments that are online that fall just outside the 3 mile radius with it placed here. If you move it down to where it actually is, all of a sudden you've got another 4,000 homes that fall in the circle. So that was something that we talked about. I understand why you say that you put it there, because you thought it was, given the information you had, you thought it was the most beneficial argument for the city. But I guess looking at it and looking in totality at, you know, some commercial space that is in Puguayo, as well as the commercial space up around a ring road, I am, you know, somewhat persuaded that 20 acres or 200,000 square feet is probably more then even at full build out, this area will be able to sustain. And so I'm willing to entertain moving some of that acreage up to the foothill alignment, simply because I just don't think even if we wait 15, 20 years, that 20 acres will ever be viable there. I think 10 acres, I think 6 is too small. I don't think that would be big enough in order to incorporate the kind of businesses we'd hope to see in this area. But I think somewhere in the 10 to 12 acres is probably more right-sized than 20. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah. Want to go quick?
I just wanted to clarify the purpose of the study. That again, I don't know the developer. I have not received a dime from them, no money whatsoever. I have no contracts with them and no anticipation of having any financial compensation from them. Simply have done work in Saratoga Springs before and was asked, which of these sites or these areas do you think makes the best long-term potential for retail? And is 20 acres, is it sufficient, is it insufficient? At 220,000 square feet on 20 acres, it seems to be a significant amount of retail space that I don't think would ever be filled or would be filled within the next 15, 20 years at least. If the question comes down to which site has the potential greatest benefit to Saratoga Springs in terms of generating sales tax revenue, then Foothill Boulevard, from the studies, and I recognize the very great comments about these studies are ebbing and flowing and have shown mistakes in other cities. If based on the data that we do have from these studies, that yes, Foothill Boulevard presents itself as having the greater potential for retail viability, which turns into sales tax dollars for your city. And you ask, why act now? Why not just sit here and we can maintain a non-development type status? It has killed other cities to take that mentality. I think Lehigh is kicking themselves for not planning better 5 and 10 years ago where their retail should have gone. And if you have the option now of saying where you think retail might be the most viable and create the most for city revenues, this simple non-biased study is suggesting to you that Foothill Boulevard presents a better option than Redwood Road. 10 acres, sure, makes a little bit more sense. You're still looking at 100, 110,000 square feet of space there. If part of that is business park, great, but our focus really was, is this a commercial retail? A gas station is 2,000 square feet. At 220,000 square feet, you're looking at 6 grocery stores. So if you can find Kohl's and Sears and Macy's in 10 years to fill that, great, but I think they're dead. So that's all.
My last comment is I appreciate, Councilman Porter, your comments. I would like to see more reduction in density for that transfer than what is maybe being proposed, and then I would probably be a little bit more open to it at that time. But then again, you're saying it's not viable now, but Foothill's not viable for 20 or 30 years. I'm just coming back to that Redwood Road, maybe 5 to 10, maybe 15. We're talking 30, 25, 30, 35, 40 years before that's viable, because we're not going to be developing west of Foothill for a long time. So thanks.
I'm just going to add, I think, part of this is this original MDA is probably predates everybody, including most staff. Can't think of anybody, everyone on staff. So it's, 20 years ago, this may have made a lot of sense. Maybe we need to look at some options. The idea of reducing density, I think, is a very big positive to the discussion. I appreciate the input from the HOA. I appreciate the input you've given on the different uses of land and values to us, because that's something as a city that we're trying to plan it and move forward. Where's the commercial center going to fall? It's kind of shifted from the crossroads to Pioneer Crossing and Redwood Road and Mountain View Corridor, Medical Drive, and places like that. And so I think, as we continue to plan, we've been very good so far with that, but this is something that, as this MD MDA comes back up, where it is such an old MDA, I think it's a fair topic, to Councilman Comber's point, to relook at the densities that were entitled back 20 years ago
Can I
or
ask
longer.
one more question, Mayor?
Yeah.
On this MDA, if I'm not mistaken, we looked at the second amendment clear back in August of 16 or something like that. Did we not pass that? It got tabled. We never. This is it still.
Yeah, it got tabled and then, so, we're having a work session before we come forward with a modified NDA.
Sorry, it's just been such a tedious and ridiculously long process that it makes it very difficult to keep track of what was actually done, so.
Okay.
Let me, if I may, Mayor. So they've asked the question in the meeting about this concept of flexible zoning. That, I think, creates problems for the council. It's more of a political concern. As you recall with the Green Springs issue and the agreement to rezone property in the future was just a nightmare politically for the council. Just based on that direction that you've given us, that's why I've gone back to them. And every time we've had a meeting about that, I said this has to happen for the council because that's the legislative discretion that they've given staff. It's very difficult to have this concept of flexible zoning. And if we're given that opportunity now, let's go ahead and take advantage of that and get it solidified. One of the issues you deal with is if you decide to, even if you have 100% discretion, and you're putting commercial zoning right in next to a neighborhood, that doesn't matter. I mean, you have to think about things from a political perspective as well as your legislative discretion as the city council. So we could explore different options of doing that, but that's not the direction that the council has given me, at
Clarification on that, Kevin. You just said we don't want to do that flexible zoning, and yet what they're specifically asking for is flexible zoning because they're saying near the corridor, in the corridor, or near neighborhood, the upper neighborhood. That is flexible. I mean, it's very fluid. That is that bubble zoning that we can't really do. It's not.
That's
How
their
are you
request.
saying? But so are you saying we shouldn't do that because we should stick with the solid zoning?
Yes, and what I'm saying is, that's been the direction the council has given to staff,
Okay.
and that's my feedback to them each time
Yeah,
they've
if the
asked
road
me
alignment
about
was set,
that.
it would be easier to say, okay, this area is zoned that. Okay, I get
Right.
that. Okay.
And
So
it's-
we are on the same page.
Right. And at least with you want to go back to this original land use map, at least showed boundaries where it was. It wasn't specific as far as a legal description, but it did show a boundary where that zoning was supposed to be. So we weren't necessarily, had something to at least guide us. And then I did want to make one other point. You talked, Councilman McComber mentioned, or maybe it was Councilman Porter, talked about the actual width of Foothill Boulevard. Right now that is preserved in the MDA. But what's not preserved is, I guess it's being upsized, and I guess Gordon has more information as far as the UDOT study. So I believe it's 190, 180 right now, and it's being expanded, so it's going to be a larger width.
Well, I think we need to get to the point where we have a legal description of that right of way. If because to Councilwoman Barsh's point, if we can't say, some of us are comfortable, some of us aren't with moving it, but if we can't say we're moving this 10 acres to this 10 acres with a legal description, then I'm not comfortable taking that step. So we have to get to that point with the developer where we are defining specific parcels. Otherwise we're doing this bubble zoning, and that is a nightmare.
And
And I don't want to do that to somebody in the future.
And to clarify, I agree with the splitting the commercial, but the timing, I agree as well. That's is it that MGA? That's no. The study for MAG, yeah, MAG got mixed up. That's will that define where Foothill Boulevard will be then? And so, because I agree too that in moving it, it needs to be assigned, so it's not just too rushed. Yeah.
So if I think it would be helpful for staff to understand the council's position. You're looking for specifically that alignment to be legally or described in the legal description as part of this. And you also would like, as part of a condition of the transfer of the commercial, to increase the size of the current study of the planned Foothill Boulevard. Is that correct as well? Okay. Then Mark, I think Mark has a question.
Yeah, and one thing on the whole bubble concept with this, if you remember back in 2012 and 2013 when we were resurrecting this development agreement, it was a mess. 13 different money lenders, property owners. What we were able to get to at that point when we amended the MDA was as good as we could possibly get. And while I completely understand and agree with the concept of us trying to specify exactly which ground is going to be rezoned to this, if that's the direction we're going, we completely understand that. I do want to just put the contextual component to that of we made tremendous strides to get to where we are. We realize that there's still steps that we need to make, but I think you know, it's part of the iterative process of us moving forward.
And I appreciate that, and I think you know, even if we do come down and plop 10 acres of commercial and up on the hillside, saying this is going to be next to the, and Mountain View moves, at least then future councils have the discretion to say, okay, you have this 10 acres, we're going to move it to over here or whatever. But we can't box them in and say, hey, you have to put 10 acres somewhere, and hopefully it makes sense.
And have them build houses all around it, and then be like, well, it doesn't make sense in the middle of the neighborhood.
It makes sense, because if MAG decides to move, or the UDOT decides to move the road after they give us the alignment, then now that's their responsibility and future councils to realign, and I agree.
So one other concept that I want to go back to, and this is something Sarah and I talked about briefly earlier today, is do you want to move regional commercial to regional commercial, or do you want to go to neighborhood commercial? Do you want to go to, you know, a different kind of format for that? If you could give us a little direction on what your thoughts are with that on the upper portion, and even the lower portion, if you have some specific direction on what you'd like that to look like, that would be helpful for us.
Before we get into that, Councilman Wilden has a comment.
Well, I guess I'll just answer that, and then my other comment is I would need to understand why we would want to, maybe there's not a better choice of words, down zone from a regional commercial to a community commercial. Because from my understanding, there's nothing that can be built in a community or neighborhood commercial that can't be built in a regional. So, yeah, I'm going the other way. So if we're trying to prevent like a specific undesirable thing, okay, that's fine. I'd just like to know specifically why we would be doing that. And then backing up to my other comment that I had before is just we have a lot of it's pure legislative decision on the rezoning here, and the reason why I'm willing to entertain it isn't to make it fit in a box or get things moving on. It's to secure a benefit to the city reduction in density. So I just wanted to clarify that point.
On the regional, I'm willing to look at a rejiggering of the ratio. That's a technical term, right? So I mean, the regional commercial seems to make sense up by the Mountain View corridor interchange that's planned at the top of Village Parkway. But I mean, I don't necessarily, I want to Councilman McCumber's point, or Councilman Wilden's point, I want to kind of understand what that's going to look like. You know, I'm not comfortable in telling you, well, you know, we're going to change it to this, or I'm willing to change to this. I want to kind of see what you guys would like to see out of that, and because I think the community commercial and neighbor commercial probably makes more sense on Redwood Road, but.
So I believe they are proposing already a shift of, what was it, 2.5 acres of the regional up above the hill. So that right now it's 5 acres of regional commercial. They're proposing leave 2.5 behind and put 2.5 up above the hill. Okay. Is that correct, Matt?
And 2.5 acres. Like, what goes into a regional that can't
kind of a gas station?
2.5 is a gas station roughly.
So.
But regional commercial allows for auto body repair, paint shops, some of the more intensive automotive uses that we weren't necessarily.
Does community commercial or neighborhood commercial allow for the neighborhood markets and stuff like that?
Does neighborhood allows for little tiny shops, but no gas stations.
So I think that's kind of what the residents are looking for down there, is more the neighborhood grocery. Not, we're not talking Smith's or Albertsons, but what are the Walmart,
Neighborhood one.
neighborhood Walmart, or what, I forget what they're calling them. But
If we were to go back in time to Harvest Hills and back then, I think we would have picked community commercial, so certain things, whatever, tire shops, I'll just say it. I'm trying to beat around the bush, right? But it's empty, it's
Still
vacant,
is.
it's an eyesore. I don't want to create that situation for another neighborhood, so I'm supportive of the community.
right. I think that give you the most flexibility.
Yeah.
It's more flexible than neighborhood commercial. So.
That's fine. And just to clarify, we don't need to transfer anything to Foothill Boulevard. We're just trying to maintain the same amount of commercial because we know that you want to have commercial down in that area. If we want to leave that open where we can come back and for a rezone down the road, then we can do that. We're just trying to follow the professional advice of people who are saying that 20 acres is not going to be supported. You don't want to have something that's not going to work in your city. That's the whole point of what we're trying to do here. So we're trying to work with the council to see what's going to work with you. So we're very flexible in this. We just don't want to hold on to land that's not going to be marketable and that's not going to be a good product for the community and for the city.
Staff to kind of have enough direction.
I do.
If so, you can call Chris and he can tell you whatever that cool new word was.
Rejigger.
Jiggered.
I don't know, I think that's
We'll work
something
on
to-
the rejiggering and
There
get
you
back
go.
to you.
I think it's something to be considered if we're having such a hard time finding a place above. Just let them come back for a rezone to future council and then get a much bigger reduction in density, because commercial is not high density. It's a lot of people, but it's not a lot of structures. It's not a lot of roof, you know what I mean? And so there's actually more view.
It's high intensity, it's just not
High intensity, not high density. So you actually, in the evenings, you have nicer views when you have that, because, ask other people who have businesses, sort of nice, because then there's not this traffic at night. You can go for a walk. There's no one really around. I mean, so there's a different type of use, and so that might be something to consider if we can get a reduction in the density, and then just let a future develop you and the future council, whoever's sitting up here in 20 years, offer you commercial up on Mountain View Corridor if you come and request it.
At the same time, as we know well, developers are going hog wild, doing as much housing as they possibly can. And I would hate to see us not have commercial set aside and then have
That's a
it
good
all
point.
filled up with houses and not have the ability to have the
But they're
commercial.
just basically arguing that it's the most opportune location, Foothill Boulevard,
Oh, yeah. And so I almost would rather have them come back in 20 years and say,
and ask for more.
it's not here, it needs to be over here, and then have them move it instead.
And ask for more, yeah.
And ask for more, which
All
they
right.
will.
Perfect.
Thanks.
I do want to comment, just to let you know why you're seeing this so much later, is that last time you saw it last year, the MAG study was being talked about, and it was projected to come out in May, and so they were waiting for that MAG study to have more information, and then the MAG study has been delayed and been delayed and been delayed. So that's part of the reason why there's been such a big gap in you seeing this again. I don't have the most recent update.
Okay, so I'm told that it's on the director's desk. So that's good news. And I'm told, I'm talking to the director of Region 3 at UDOT. And so I was told that that would be in September. So this month.
Okay.
That's what I was going to ask, this year, not September.
Perfect. We will move on. That was a very lengthy discussion. Hopefully, Sarah, when you hopefully you got something out of it when you get back and we get ready to this and you send the proposal. If you would, please send it to the HOA too, so they can provide input on what's proposed
I will.
on behalf of the residents down there also. Okay. You have,
Just a final comment. The reason why we're trying to do this now is we're trying to plan neighborhood 4, and we can't do that until we know what's happening. So we can't wait 10 years to decide whether we're going to reduce it, because it's being planned now. That's why we're trying to figure it out.
Sarah, can you work with them so we can get this back before we have to read notes from 5 years ago?
Yeah.
So, okay. Please work with Sarah so we can.
Yeah,
handle
when
this
you
back.
see it again, it'll have a proposed amendment, some language within a proposed amendment, and then we'll have to continue the rezone and general plan
Councilwoman
amendment.
Barch and I will see Terry Thursday, so we will remind her to sign that and review it.
Well, I'm sorry. I just don't feel like I got the feedback I was looking for. Are you willing for us to do a reduction in commercial, to do a reduction in density? Is that something the council is willing to entertain?
If you have a reduction in density units for a reduction in retail space, I just had this thought, and maybe I'm just throwing it out there again, we're hashing this out. We can't rezone the land, but in the master development agreement, can we actually say in there that they are required to provide 10 additional acres within their development? Because that's a contract, that's not a zoning.
Yeah, but it's
So, my,
But it still says that they have to provide it.
so, okay, let me just be clear on what I gave, the direction and the feedback that I gave the applicant. The direction was rezone the property now and come up with a legal description so you're not dealing with a Green Springs issue in the future. You're not wanting to put another council in that position of having to make that unpopular decision, because on a land use map that's in part of the development agreement, it shows this as regional commercial or community commercial, whatever it may be, but it was zoned residential or it was zoned ag, because then that council is forced to rezone something, which should be a legislative decision and have legislative discretion.
I think we won't have the same problem with Green Springs because we won't lose the master development agreement. We'll actually have something to
I
review.
think the council, you've got some of the council that's willing to entertain a reduction for reduction, but I think you'll want to work with our attorney also to clarify the MDA, where we do have 7 landowners involved. We do. Councilman McComber brings up a good point with that, but I do think you've got council members willing to entertain your proposal. They just want more information around it.
So from a delay standpoint, you'd like us to align the MAG corridor study through the property, and you'd like to see what that looks like. You'd like to see an exhibit that kind of identifies a legal description of where the commercial is going to move to and what that's going to look like in conjunction with UDOT's transportation planning. And then you'd like to, was there another item? Reduction in density. Basically update the exhibit that shows the reduction in density. And what I'm hearing is you want more than just an R15 to an R9. You'd like to see more of a reduction.
If we're giving them 5 more acres to build on, it's less dense if you build the same number of units. Why don't you want to see it?
And maybe that comes through the dedication of right-of-way to Mountain, or to Foothill Boulevard or something like that.
And so also some sort of Mountain View corridor right-of-way dedication. Okay. We will bring back, Sarah, you got those 4 items? We'll bring back something that addresses those 4 things, and then we'll have Sarah set something up with you to start working on that. And one thing that I think is important as well, there's still 2 property owners that are involved. So we've got Cardinal and SCP Fox Hollow. So we're going to have to work with both of those developers to make sure that we come back with a plan that works for both.
And last time, the other developer was the one that wasn't even at the table with us. They weren't here and they weren't wanting to.
It's here.
But he wasn't wanting to, he was wanting to keep the higher density housing and not go to the single family.
That was
Matt.
Oh, that was you. You were the one that wasn't.
There was one meeting where Matt wasn't able to attend, and we had to table our discussion to see exactly what they wanted.
Okay, so now
We
both.
didn't want to abandon the ability to do townhomes, but we've since let that go.
Okay, so we're, both of you are on board.
So
then. Okay.
just from my perspective, an R9, to me, that seems like you're really committing to a limited amount of product types. And if you have a lower R, it gives more flexibility and different type of product types. When I just hear R9 across an entire project, that screams solid townhomes. I know it may not work that way, but that's just.
We can always go less dense, you know, when we actually build it. It's just the maximum density we can do. It's more flexible that way for us.
We have enough direction
Okay.
to work
Perfect.
something out.
Thank you so much for your time. Okay, we will, because we're well into the evening, we'll jump to the city council policy meeting because we do have a business item we have some people here for that Mark had promised them a much shorter work session.
I don't promise short work sessions.
Okay, present tonight we have Councilman Porter, Councilwoman Barch, myself, Councilman McComber, Councilman Wilden, and Councilman Podeska. Threw me for a loop there. Invocation. Councilman Porter, will you provide us with an invocation? Councilman Podeska, will you lead us in the pledge?
Our Heavenly Father, we're grateful for this opportunity for us to gather together as citizens of Saratoga Springs and to undertake the business of our city, our residents tonight. We ask Thee to bless us with discernment to be able to find the solutions that will benefit the residents of our city both today and into the future, that we will be able to provide the services and for their needs, that we'll be able to do so in a way that is to their benefit. Grateful for this great country where we're allowed to govern ourselves. Yeah, ask Thee to please bless men and women of the armed forces as they serve overseas, protecting those freedoms. And we say these things in the name of Thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Okay, time has been set aside for public input to express ideas, concerns, and comments. If you're here for the public hearing, item number 1, code amendments to Title 19. Please save your comments for that public hearing. Please be respectful of time. Try and limit your comments to 3 minutes, and please try to avoid repetitive comments. Is anybody here for public input? State your name and address for the record.
Hi, Leah Hansen, Saratoga Springs, 341 Songbird Lane. Some people are watching this live and they say that the audio is a little bit iffy. Is there any way that we could fix that, please? Thank you.
Okay. So,
We are looking
guys, you
at
need
more
to chew on your
permanent
mics. Okay, is there any other public input? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public input. I'm going to skip to business item number 2, the appointments to the Veterans Advisory Council. This is a new advisory board for Saratoga Springs. This is exciting. Councilman Porter's had a hand in this, along with Annalisa, to start to work.
Yes. What do you need from me? Oh, okay. So we've had 3 people that are very qualified applicants that have turned in their applications. And let me see if I can remember all their names. They are Ruth Ann Caldwell, Emily Mount, and Carl Sachs. Did I pronounce those also? If you're here, if you could come up. You're the one to represent. All right. And you are? Emily Mount. Sorry, I haven't met him. I've just spoken on the phone and contacted him via email. So, and we would just like to put them forward to be appointed by the mayor officially so that we can get going, get to work.
I think this is great. This has been a long time coming. We had a chance to talk at one of the Monday night events. I think we've got 3 great applicants that I would like to recommend to the council for approval and entertain a motion on that. Or do you have comments, Chris? 'Cause I know you've been heavily involved.
Yeah, I just, in looking over the applications, I just wanted to say that I thought all 3 applicants kind of exemplified what I hoped this could become. We have 2 veterans that are bringing their extensive experience and know-how, and they haven't been volunteering in the city, and so we've been missing that contribution that they can uniquely bring. And then we have a spouse who I can definitely feel her pain with the kind of feeling adrift. We aren't in a major, and we have a camp up on the hill, but we're not in a major troop concentration area, or in my case, a fleet concentration area. So you don't have that community of the unit when your loved one is deployed. And so I think that this will definitely be something that benefits the citizens of our city as well as the veterans that we have among us.
That's great. I will entertain a motion.
I move that we appoint Ruth Crandall, Emily Mount, and I'm sorry, what was the first name? Carl Sachs.
S-A-C-H-S.
To the Veterans Advisory Council, Resolution 17-85, dated today.
I'll second.
I have a first from Councilman Porter, a second from Councilwoman Comber. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Do a roll call. Councilman Podeska.
Aye.
Wilden.
Aye.
McComber.
Aye.
Barch.
Aye.
Porter.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Was that your first vote? What an appropriate first vote. That's a good one. That's a good first vote.
Thank you for your willingness to serve as we get this going and look at Veterans Memorial and some other projects that Chris has been working on with Camp Williams and some of the ACUB funding and stuff. So thank you.
I think this is sort of an appropriate time real quick. Someone who's been a real champion of veterans in our city, Jimmy Kawato, passed away. And his memorial service will be actually this Saturday from 10 to 10:45 will be more of like a memory, pictures, that kind of thing. And then from 11 to 12, it will be actually his memorial service. And he probably was this advisory board for the city before. He was the one pushing events in our city more than anyone else. And so I think this was just an appropriate time to say that's at the Centennial Chapel on Centennial Boulevard in the city. And he definitely was someone who cared very much about veterans, and he died from cancer. So.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go back to reports. Council have any reports?
I have one.
Councilman Porter?
Councilman McComber and I were able to attend the groundbreaking for the Quick Quack car wash this morning. It was a cool event. They even brought out the big shovel to do some real digging and everything. They didn't let us play with that, unfortunately.
Yeah, probably wise.
Probably wise. But just, some of the things they talked about were the fact that they have a membership plan and how you can use it across any Quick Quack across the nation, which Councilman Montgomery and I thought was pretty cool. And also that, just the rate that they've grown in Utah County. I think they said they've got 7 that they've opened in the last year, and this is 8, 9, and 10.
We're 8, and then there's 2 more right behind
there's 2 more right behind us. So they're, I just wanted to recognize them as a business that was coming to our city and investing in Saratoga Springs, and congratulate them on that.
Can I piggyback on that?
Yeah.
Because one of the things that they talked about at the beginning, and Chris, you'll probably remember, they like to, at the very beginning when they open a new location, is donate all of their profits to someone in the community, a family, or who are struggling, who have maybe a situation. They've had one where a girl a child was killed, and then the husband died, and the mom had just 2 kids, and so really struggling. They were able to help pay all of the bills from all of the medical bills and all of the covering all those costs. They've had lots of different things, and so I just want to throw it out there. So if you know of potential families that we can then share with Quick Quack, that they might be able to benefit from something like this, they really do want to focus on that. And then also a cool part of the event is because the first 10 days are free. All car washes are free, and those donations that you can give are what go towards helping that family. And so I think what a great opportunity for, one, get a free car wash, and 2, give a little money to somebody who really needs it.
Right.
So I think that's a great service. And so if you know of anyone, then please let any of us know. We can forward it on to the appropriate people.
We have an estimate on there.
100 days.
100 days.
100 days, they said.
Yeah, they
We'll
said
be
it's a
open the
100-day
100 days build. And they said this one's a lot easier than the one in American Fork because that one's so tight in that little space. They don't have the vacuums there. It's just a through. That's it.
An express. Yeah.
Express. Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Bark?
Just 2 items of information. One for staff. We probably need to get enforcement out again, especially on signage. We've got lots of A-frame signs and signs that are in illegal areas. And then also lots of trailers parked illegally on streets, again, in various locations. And maybe box trucks advertising things, and yeah, so if we can get enforcement on those again. And then secondly, for the leagues of cities and towns, they announced the new executive director for that, and they actually went out. They had over 150 candidates from all over the nation, and Cameron Deal, who has actually been basically the assistant executive director for a while now, has been chosen to take that position. He's very good. He's got a great relationship with a lot of the legislators on the Hill, and a very calm, good candidate. So, and unfortunately, he's a U fan. So, anyway, back at Mark's,
So
you know, showing the U.
Zone, right?
There you go. Anyway, so no, just that's the only announcements that I had.
Okay. Last week, David Johnson and I had a chance to attend the Get in the River with the Jordan River Commission, which we discovered there is a Pioneer Crossing in Jordan River Bridge that they gave us 2 addresses, and I was headed the wrong direction because who wouldn't be in Saratoga Springs at Pioneer Crossing and Jordan River? But it was a kickoff kind of to celebrate the month-long, what they've done with the river, getting people involved in the river, and cleaning it up. There's quite a few people in attendance from the various cities along the Jordan River. They talked about continuing to build access, how many thousands and thousands of pounds of noxious weeds they've pulled out, and shoreline they've restored in an effort to clean the river up as it goes. And hopefully someday we won't be sending an algae bloom down it either. So it was a good meeting. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, David.
No, can you hear me okay? I just think kind of along what you were saying, one of the things that they mentioned is that the Jordan River has always been kind of an afterthought, whereas in other communities you see boardwalks and city centers and stuff kind of built around these sorts of things, and so they're really trying to push of let's clean this up and let's make it a beautiful place where we can have trails. And one of the things that they mentioned was the Jordan River Parkway Trail that goes clear from Utah County to, I believe,
You can get up into Park City and Ogden.
but I think it goes right, exactly. I was going to say, yeah, I was debating whether or not, I think they said up to Davis County is where they said it reached up to, so if I'm not mistaken, but yeah, not much more than I wanted.
It's quite a trail system over I can't remember how many hundreds of miles of trail been built and connected into it through various communities as part of the healthy initiative. It's come a long ways. They've talked about stopping runoff from the industrial places along the river, working with the cities along the river. As we've done our planning here, we've tried to create a waterfront zone that protects the beauty of the river and cleans it up for access. And a lot of cities are starting to kind of follow the similar thing. So it was a good meeting. It was a good time to meet some of the other mayors and cities that are in part of this.
So, Mayor, I was just going to add that our cleanup that we're doing here in Saratoga Springs is in partnership with Lehigh, since we share both sides of the river, and that will be September 16th at 9 a.m. And it'll be located at Jordan Willis Park. You can find more information on our website and in the city newsletter.
Okay. Councilman McComber.
I just want to bring to the council's attention, there's some concerns. You might be seeing some Facebook chatter and things about dumping happening on the south end of Lakeside, right along the lake, of construction dump waste, but like cement and other things. I've reached out to Mark, and he's looking into that, and so we'll continue to give you updates on that. And then just one other addition I'd like to bring up is that yes, there's a lot of fill that they're bringing in, clean fill that you would be able to develop on, but I thought we had rules on how much grade change you can do and how much fill you can bring in, and it's starting to look like it's exceeding that, and so they're trying to change the grade. And other people are concerned because when they bought their home, they knew what the grade was to the lake for view corridors, etc. And then now they're changing the grade and bringing it up quite high, is what their plan is. But a lot of this other fill, you could never build on it. It would be considered a dump, construction dump. I actually went down, took pictures, video, and was sort of appalled at what I found. And so I think that we need to make sure that sometimes these out-of-the-way places can get taken advantage of. This is, yeah, sort of just, yeah, south of Lakeside, back on the backside of the golf course where they're building, where they're potentially going to be building homes, and where they're looking to build homes, they're putting big chunks of cement, old sewer pipe, cement pipes, they're just dumping over there, and big piles of asphalt, old asphalt. So even the chemicals that can come from that, seepage, things like that. So
that can look lake.
Yeah, and it's very close to the lake, and it's in the slope to the lake. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. So staff is on that, and we'll keep you up to date. Thanks.
Councilman Wilden.
Maybe Owen or Mark, if you could pass this along to Chief Burton. A friend that I have that lives in the city, he called the police to have him come and inspect his ATV like he's required, and they were there within 7 minutes, and he said it was one of the best conversations he's had with a city employee ever. He spent quite a bit of time helping him get it registered, and even told him different trails in the city and what's great about the city and everything like that. So it's great service that our police officers are offering. It's great to hear that they're so friendly and engaged. Residents, it's a good thing we don't send out our city manager to do that. Totally different experience. So, but if you'd pass that along to the chief, that's much appreciated, and pass along to their friendliness and outreach to the community.
We're talking about police, right? Not fire?
Huh?
Not fire?
Police.
Okay.
Police. And full disclosure, they didn't realize who this individual was, but it was one of my brothers. The new brother lives in this, not a new brother. My mom is past childbearing. It's a brother that recently moved to the city. They didn't realize that there was a relation to me, so it's just neat to hear that type of feedback. We have a new baby, not a new brother. I'm done.
Thank you.
For being done, so.
Yes. Councilman Podeska.
I'm just happy to be here. It's a good group to serve with, and excited to continue the work of what you guys have started and continue on.
We've got committees that the former seat was assigned to, so staff, if you could get with Ryan and get him in contact with the various committees and people so we can get him sworn in and taken care of.
Yes, please.
Okay. We need to go back and finish one more item under the City Council work session, the special events permit change and policy amendment.
So, Mayor and Council, as you've directed us with Patriot Park being planned, you want us to change or to make it so our policy allows for rentals for baseball and softball tournaments. As we've looked into this, we also looked into our special events permit, and over the summer, and has been getting quite a few requests that we tried to follow for per code, but we wanted some direction from you. Currently our policy is that pavilions can be rented and the North Fire Station community room can be used. but we've had other requests. We always have people coming in wanting to rent our parks, which we've said, you know, it's not per policy. We always have fundraisers, you know, people that want to raise money for a good cause, whether it's for somebody who has a disease, hard time, etc. So what we're looking for as staff, we're looking for some direction from you is, do you want us just to amend the policy to allow for the Patriot Park fields to be rented when they're built? If so, we can just do that. Or do we add, like, you know, we had a request for the baseball or basketball courts to do a 3-on-3 tournament there at Neptune, or the stage. Really cool things, but I guess the one thing we need to keep in mind is that if we allow it, we can't pick and choose who we, you know, so long as they meet whatever requirement we set for them, whether insurance or whatnot, that we make that follow it. So them follow those rules, but if they meet it, we can't, you know, scrutinize based on their content or what they're doing. So just need some direction from you as council.
How can, I mean, so we can allow a burlesque, we have to allow a burlesque show on our stage at Neptune Park? I mean, how much can we discriminate?
I'll let the attorney answer where we can, but
yeah, so that it would just depend on what our community definition is of obscene, right? So obscene speech is not protected under the First Amendment, but there's a lot of debate about what obscene is, and it comes down to typically community standards. Community standards in Saratoga Springs, Utah are not going to be the same as Saratoga Springs, New York. So we're obviously going to have stricter standards here. Courts are going to be more lenient towards us in what our definition is of obscene. However, other things that the council may find objectionable we wouldn't be able to restrict as far as ideas and content.
Well, and even, so for example, everybody thinks, yeah, it'll be really great to let, you know, a little girls dance troupe go up there and do their, you know, summer dance program, and most people would think that's fine. But that also means that, you know, if some skateboarders want to go up there and do a skateboarding demonstration, they would be doing that. And I'm not saying that that would necessarily be an offensive thing, but, you know.
Signs to say no skateboarding so they didn't wax our edges.
They do it anyway.
Yeah.
Well,
but,
the thing is
you
we
know,
could actually say they couldn't go on the rims. We could actually say things that would detrimentally affect the structure.
Right. Or more, probably a better example is if we're going to let a group go and perform a music presentation there, that's great. But you're also getting a rock and roll band that might come in that maybe isn't necessarily to the taste of those, you know, at the park. So, I mean, fundamentally, you've got different types of things that now we're going to have new problems that are going to arise, which is fine. If we want to do that, that's fine. But fundamentally, you know, we're not going to be able to control speech. We're going to be able to control sound decibels, but that's about it. You know, we're not going to be able to say, you know, we're going to rent to this type and we're not going to rent to this type. And so it becomes a very, you know, we're going to have to have a very clear line, and then it's going to be an administrative decision on our part. Do they meet the qualifications by having the insurance and by meeting the sound code and whatnot? And then after that, it is what it is.
So I think some of those are easy, right? The baseball park or Patriot Park is easy. That's what it's intended for. It's set up that way. Everybody knows it's going to be a loud, bright, noisy thing. Neptune, the basketball courts, to me, makes perfect sense, renting those out. Basketball is basketball. So if you're playing on it and you're playing basketball, it doesn't matter if it's kids playing there or if it's a little tournament that's, you know, there for a fundraiser or whatever else. I don't have a problem with that. The stage makes me nervous for a couple of reasons. Structurally, Councilman McComber mentioned, but also sound-wise, the residents in that area were prepared and knew they were moving in next to an area where we'd be very, very loud during, for example, splash days. Not necessarily on a regular basis, so I don't know. I'm also concerned about letting them use our sound equipment. That makes me okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that I wouldn't want to do. So if you're saying no to that already, then that's okay.
But one other thing, and just one other example is for example, if we're going to rent out the basketball courts, can a group come in and then rent all of the field space to host, you know, a soccer or lacrosse or even, you know, football tournament at Neptune Park? And up to this point, we've not rented out those fields. It's first come, first serve, with the city having priority usage for that. This now would then lead us to that path, if you choose to, where we're renting that field, and now the impact of splashes, what Councilwoman Barch was just talking about, is what she might see on a weeknight basis or a weekly basis with large groups of people participating in events.
So my question to that point is, if we allow them to rent the basketball fields, are we then required to allow them to rent the?
No, but we would want
just
you to give
asking
us,
where we want to draw that line.
Where do we draw that line? If
Okay.
you're okay with basketball courts, great. Let us draft a policy. We'll bring it back. If you're okay with the pavilion, great. Let us get decibel levels and let us put some parameters in place. If you want to rent the fields, then we kind of need to clarify. Or do we want to keep field rentals specific to a sports complex? You know, because we probably don't want Harvest Hills Park being used for, you know, someone's private festival or their private fundraising event. You may want to, I don't know, but those are the clear lines that we need you to give us so that we can draft a policy that makes sense to what you would like from a policy standpoint.
Okay.
Councilman Wilden?
Fine with the basketball courts, fine with the pavilion as long as things are limited, and obviously the baseball field with pickleball courts. Even then, though, I would like to put some parameters where we're only going to rent it out X amount of times per month or whatever it may be, because what we don't want is basketball courts, which was intended for the residents to be constantly booked. So if we put some parameters around, we're only going to do it X amount of times regardless of who it is during a month, and it puts it on a first come, first serve, but it does open it up to other opportunities. Fields, no, other than baseball, just because they tear it up, you know, with certain type of things. So.
No, if I remember right on the fields, though, Rick said, I could be wrong with parks, that they can rent the backs of the fields out to like Little League and that, and they put in things where they for sod coverage damage.
I'm thinking of the example where we talked about lacrosse in restoring fields and things like that. And yes, you can put in those kinds of things, but if someone, you know, damages the field in, you know, say like a lacrosse tournament, it may be weeks before we can get play back out there, and we're going to lose those weeks while sod is being restored and grass is being restored and things like that. And so I don't want to, you know, aim it directly at lacrosse, but you know, all kinds of events, you know, and again, it's like a small kids, you know, a couple of really small kids running around, usually not a big problem. But if you get, you know, an adult soccer tournament or lacrosse tournament or football tournament that now all of a sudden jumps in, it also becomes, you know, from a liability standpoint, you know, we're going to want to make sure and understand those parameters. So I'm hearing no on fields.
Are we able to, like, to your point with the baseball fields, are we able to say, like, during the you know, from this date to this date, you can only play baseball on these fields? So we're not having lacrosse?
Yeah, that's, I mean, the intent is to get what facilities are you as council
I'm willing to let them play lacrosse when we're not using them for baseball or soccer or whatever, because the field shouldn't go empty for no reason.
Little League football,
yeah.
I think,
Well,
needs a place.
You need to also understand, I mean, Heston's not here, but I have a little bit of an understanding of the recreation side of things, and he's already short on fields. So I would really discourage you, other than the baseball complex, to be renting those out. And when it's not being used necessarily as baseball, he's going to have 6 soccer games going on there, or, you know, 6 flag football games going on there, because you can have one site supervisor for that whole area, as opposed to right now he's divided up. You know, he has to have one there at Neptune, one at Shea. So I would be hesitant, if I were you, to look at renting fields, just because we are already super tight on that in our community.
I would like to see.
Yes, exactly. Other than the baseball complex itself, because that's part of the thing it was built for, right?
When this comes back for actual policy session, it would be great if we could have Heston here.
Absolutely.
For the input and the discussion. That's a good point. I didn't think about what he's got programming. We've tasked him with growing the recreation in a rapidly growing city.
And if you're suddenly limiting what he can use.
And he's got state awards for being amazing at what we hired him for. So I think it would be great to have him part of this discussion along with you. And
Mayor, Mark and I met with Heston this afternoon and talked about this for a little bit. And part of that was we wouldn't look at, the preference from staff's point would not be other fields, but sports complex, because that it's built for athletic events, things like that. That would be where we would allow it, assuming it doesn't impact city rec leagues, obviously. So we would draft the policy such that we'd only allow rentals when you know, it's not impacted.
I'd like him to be involved in that, but then also be here for the discussion.
So also, as we expand that park, we can also expand rentals at that park. if you're comfortable, we'll bring back a policy that will address the sports complex.
I would like to see something around the basketball courts as well.
So
But
basketball.
with limited dates.
Well, and I also would have liked to include volleyball into that, because we will be having some more volleyball added, some sand volleyball in the community. And I just feel like if people are interested in the basketball, once we get a decent, where you have a few volleyball together, you're going to have the same thing. So it would be nice if we knew, just for me, so I know, is it available or not, you know?
So
The other thing that I'd like to see on that is some kind of a sunset, I guess, so we can have kind of a test period where we can come back and say, we're gonna try this for a year, we're gonna try this for 2 years, and we're gonna come back and reevaluate and see how it's working and what we need to change.
So you want a sunset clause that automatically removes rentals?
No, I think it automatically triggers
There's
a
review.
Just bring it back.
Okay.
But and then I didn't speak on the stage. So when you said pavilion earlier, you meant the stage, right?
They already do pavilion, so
Yeah.
stage.
So I just want to make, for me personally, I'm not a doomsdayer. I think that we should give it a try. To your point, we can always pull it back. I think that the dance studios and the karate studios and the taekwondo studios, right now, you know where they're going? Lehigh. And all of those residents, all of those people, they have nowhere in our city. One day we might have a stage down in Fox Hollow, actually. But we don't right now, right? So I think that it would be, and in that we would obviously absolutely allow people to rent that. And so if we're willing to let them do that, I think we should give it a try. I think that part of the fee, when we're determining what our fee structure is a really good decimal reader that we include in our costs. Because in order to set a fee, we have to show what the costs are of maintenance and all that to justify the fee. We can't just charge arbitrary fee. So I want to make sure that we have a few, like you would have one, even Heston can have one, the city could have one, that like the Parks Department, we'd have that so that at any event we could have somebody there making sure that they don't exceed it, or even the police, code enforcement, just that kind of stuff. So keep those things in mind when you're looking at the costs. But I actually think that getting better use of that, we spent a lot of money on that stage, and it really, other than this year, because we've done such a great job with our Monday night events, and those have been pretty successful, not too many complaints, I mean, here and there. But again, I always tell people, I live on the back of a golf course, I get to hear golfers cuss when they miss their putt. You know, and I can't, it's freedom of speech, right? And so my wife likes to tease them and say, it's first time out, you're welcome to go up to the woman's tee. She always tells them that when they cuss.
I apologize on behalf of Mayor Bailey. So.
But whenever they cuss, she always gives them a hard time and teases them and stuff, because trying to remind them that people live around it. These people live next to a huge park. They have no one in front of them. They have all this great open space, amazing view corridors. That comes with a price too.
Yeah, and I say the main thing that we've heard a little bit of complaint was maybe some of the late movies for some people that might have to work late or have to be up early type
Earplugs
thing.
are amazing. Ask the people along Redwood Road right now who have construction at night. The earplugs work great.
So I think Owen, is it okay if I have a question? I don't know. I don't want to go beyond. So my biggest clarification that I would like in doing these permits, and the biggest, question I have in my head is, currently we do not rent out our parks. We do not rent them out for festivals. People can't come and just rent park space to put in a festival or things. But there have been some emotionally sensitive events that have been brought to us that this city's kind of gone like this to, and it's hard because then you have someone else come in and I say, well, our code won't allow that. And they say, well, I know you've done it before. And my answer has been, well, that was before me. I can't answer for what has happened before I've taken over these permits, but this is code and I have to follow it. And I'm pretty good at customer service, so I think I talk it out with them because I have a lot of background, right, in event planning and what are things they can do that can work in the parameters. But I guess my question is, what is that? You know what I'm saying? Currently our code doesn't allow it unless it's in pretty much Walmart's parking lot or agricultural. And so I guess I in a lot of ways feel like how we have it established is the right way because of after speaking with the trust and speaking with other communities, with liability issues, it really is probably the correct answer. But I guess in saying that, we do need to recognize that when we do, if that is the correct answer, which I think it should be, that needs to be the answer no matter what. Does that make sense? And I just don't know the best way to move forward with that.
So when you say rent out the park, are you talking the park in its entirety reserved for that event only, and it's a big boutique? It's like what kind of? Can you give us examples?
It's more allowing them to use some of the park space. It wouldn't be like allow them. Well, I mean, the question would be all of Neptune. I think the answer we have is no. But it's allowing them to have some park space in a park where they could do a little boutique or fundraisers or whatnot.
We currently rent out like I know we talked about the pavilion, meaning the stage, but like the gazebo.
We rent out the pavilions, and what we've had is people will rent out the pavilion and have a fundraiser or whatnot, and sometimes they'll bring in things that aren't allowed in the parks, like they'll try to bring in inflatables or bounce houses or things like that.
I see.
And so it's just more of a, we've worked as best we can to educate people, but we just kind of, we need the direction from council to say, where do you want us to draw the line so we as staff can...
Right.
If I think about the liability on those, they'd have to have massive insurance to be able to do that.
Well, yeah, and
That's
usually they're
where we're
wanting to bring in
leaning.
inflatables. They're wanting to bring in a boutique. They're wanting to, right? They want to bring in a lot of things because they want to bring in a lot of money because they are always trying to earn money for something that is very good. You know what I'm saying? It's always for some sort of research or to help. I've had one approach us about helping veterans. I've had, just different things. And one of the things we do as a city, any group, any person like that, we always allow them, and Shelley, you would know this, they get a free booth at Splash. Like that's one thing we've done as a city, that anybody, if they're wanting to help someone in our community, you can have a free booth at Splash, sell whatever you want, as long as you meet Utah Health Code, the health department, and stuff, and sell away. We'll provide the 10,000 people that are going to come, and so I feel like that's a pretty good answer on the city's part. And maybe that's the way, is we need to direct them to be doing that when these people come. But it's just hard because every time they come, it pinches at your heart, right? You know what I'm saying? And we all feel bad for them when we have an understanding, of what they're wanting to do. But on the flip side, I feel like we need to be very strong on whatever our decision is.
And if we allow for one group to rent it, then
No, go ahead.
it's all groups. If we allow it for one, we have to allow it for all. There's no...
But currently our code
says
nobody.
Yeah. My only concern and thought, I understand where you're coming from, and I can see the wisdom in what you're recommending. My only concern is some of this is what builds community. Is when something happens, we've had tragedies in our city before, and the community comes together around somebody, and if we're not providing a space for that, we're kind of stunting that knitting of community that we are hoping to see continue to occur.
Brighten a day.
Yeah.
The Tinnies did for their daughter to start that foundation up at Shea Park. I mean, that was a great thing that brought a lot of Eagle Mountain, Saratoga Springs, some Lehigh residents together for a good cause. So I don't know where you draw that line. That's tough because
you want to
Tinnies
allow
are a
those,
big
but
part of our community. I mean, they help people all the time. A lot of it's unnoticed. And then they did this to better other people's lives with the loss of their daughter. And I would hate to see those opportunities lost.
And that's what a lot of them are. A mom whose daughter got in, and she's a high school student at Westlake. She got in a premier musical program back east, and they were trying to raise money to be able to send her this summer. A neighbor that wanted to do a fundraiser because one of their neighbors had a child that lost their hand this last summer. And so they're wanting to help out the family. Like, that's what they all are, is that kind of thing. And so...
But there's also the flip side is a business wants to come in and rent the park and do something that is a for-profit thing. So this is a really complex issue.
It's for a day.
It's for a day, and we're shutting down a portion of the park for a private entity. So
and we did have that once where we had a woman come in. She found a loophole that we closed, but she came in with a boutique, and Darcy and I got calls for months because there were people that sold there that other people didn't get their product, and they were kind of holding us liable. And we, this wasn't a city event. This is someone who rented it, so that kind of opens that.
So if I could, I know that this is a really complex issue, and we just dropped kind of a really big one on you. Why don't you think about that? We'll start drafting policy, and we'll reach out to you individually to get some more feedback from you as we're crafting that policy.
Throw one more thing out back to the stage comment with Councilman McComber. Wilden reminded me when he attended the Rage Against the Machine concert in 1996 down in Spanish Fork. But that was a big issue, and
Oh.
they have worked with attorneys and kind of crafted, you know, size, scope of an event so that you can have the community pieces, Councilman Porter's talking to, and people can use the stage, but not have something that, for whatever reason, caused lots of alarm. Back in the 90s, that sounds so long
I
ago.
heard about that.
Yeah, we.
Did you limit it to charitable events? I think you
Yeah,
can define that.
yeah.
Mayor, we certainly intend to look at other policies and things like that. We
What
just
was
need we intend to look at other policies and what other cities are doing. We've already started doing that. We just needed a general direction from the council so that we knew which direction to go, because we didn't want to spend staff time if there was a direction you didn't want us to
Do you have the
head.
direction you need, do you think, to?
Yeah.
I think we've got it on most of it. I'd like you to think about kind of what we just brought up, and then I'm going to have staff reach out to you, and we want to talk to you a little bit more because we realize it's a sensitive issue. And the problem is this is one of those ones where there's some causes where you're like, wow, my heartstrings have been pulled. We'd really love to do this, but is it really the policy that's right for the whole organization? And so why don't you soak on that, and then we'll reach out to you here in the next
We'll get
week
some
and
policy.
talk more about
Huh.
that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. And okay, back to the public hearing that people have been dying for. Title 19, or do we have people here for business items, Mark?
Fox Hollow 10, I believe, item number 3. Is that what you folks are here for?
Title
And
19
are
will take
you-
a minute.
You're with them.
Okay.
Really, most people don't admit that.
Let's go to let's go to business item number 3, the Fox Hollow, number 10, Hawks Estate Phase 1 preliminary and final plats.
Okay, this is located in the Fox Hollow Master Development Agreement in the southern portion of the city. More specifically, Neighborhood 10 within Fox Hollow. This right here is Phase 1 of Neighborhood 10, and this is the entire project. They are asking for some variations related to lot setbacks. That's outlined in the staff report with some comparisons to other neighborhoods in Fox Hollow. The Fox Hollow Master Development Agreement does allow for a density that's much higher than what's proposed in this particular location. There is also a park in the center of the project that includes a variety of amenities. And this is the phasing plan. The phasing plan has some odd boundaries due to ownership. There's 2 owners in there, so that's part of what you're seeing there. However, they won't necessarily build it in that odd shape. It's just what they need to do to address their ownership. This is the fencing. There's 2 types of fencing proposed. Along Redwood Road, there's a proposal for semi-private vinyl, which would match the abutting development, and then along, let's see, what's that road? Wildlife, thank you. Wildlife, you see the more solid with semi-private at the top of the fence. And then there's another entry monument that will be proposed at the entrance of Fox Hollow. The HOA has commented, and also in the MDA design guide, there are design guidelines which require a entrance sign to the neighborhood, so that needs to be submitted still. In the park, they're proposing some benches, a playground, some frisbee golf, and a soccer field, and grass in the middle with trees and shrub beds on the perimeter. And then because it's in a planned unit development, they are required to propose elevations. So they've submitted several options that have been reviewed by the HOA. There's a letter included in the packet that these have preliminary approval based on the comments, and what you're seeing in red are comments provided by the HOA. So things like address the railing or overhangs over the garage roofs or things like that. These would all generally be 2-story homes because of the size of the lot. And then these are the comments. Some of them I've already mentioned. One comment the HOA did make is that evergreens don't survive very well in this area, and they're asking if other trees can be used. However, we do have a code requirement for evergreens. I don't know if there's a way to accommodate that request or not. And then the request regarding fencing is that it match what's already on Redwood Road. That's been addressed. And the HOA would like to work with the developer on the playground selection rather than being tied specifically to the one in the packet. That allows them the option that if, when that's ready to go in, if they find a better one for the same price, that they can suggest that to the developer. And then there is, the HOA rules require no same home shall be built on 2 lots on either side or on 3 lots across the street. That can be regulated by the HOA. And then the staff recommends approval with the conditions in the staff report, and we've discussed all those. So the variations, we would need another sign plus an approval letter from the HOA, and then the open space would need to be proportionate to each phase, and that may be handled through bonding due to the odd shapes of the phasing. And also there's a condition that would allow the applicant to work with staff and the HOA on final approval of the playground.
Does the developer have anything they'd like to say before council discussion? We got a hot seat up here. It's queued up, ready to go.
Forgive me.
I'm
Mark Greenwood with ALM Engineering in Provo. Scott McCord, who's the developer for this particular.
Perfect. We'll have council direct questions. Tanya, before the council discusses, does the HOA have anything they'd like to say?
Well, records for coming up here today.
Yes.
And first of all, the HOA would like to express our gratitude for all the hard work that staff has put into this project. It's been an ongoing project for a while now, so we appreciate it. I know they've put in a lot of time into it. Same thing with the developers. As was mentioned, this is a much lower density than what the MDA is supposed to have, so we appreciate that very much. In addition, they also provide a usable open space, which is key word for us, because it's gonna be what's gonna make that neighborhood attractive to our HOA. So thank you for that. Just a couple of comments that Sarah made as well. I feel like we've been working with the developer well on these issues. We just simply ask for a little bit more flexibility on the tree selection, just because we know our land, well, our property so well. We know what tends to do well and what doesn't. And what tends to happen sometimes is when tree selection goes in, it looks great on paper, on the design, just because it's pretty and it's supposed to go there. However, after the developer plants it and it gets turned over to the HOA gets to go in and replace all the dead trees that didn't do so hot. So that's just something that we ask you to please consider. Evergreens is kind of the specific ones. They're very hard to keep alive. The other point is the playground selection, and the reason for that is just because playground manufacturers tend to kind of cycle through products. So we don't necessarily want to be locked into this particular brand, this particular model of a playground, and then 2-3 years down the road, when the developer actually goes to install that playground, we suddenly realize, well, this particular playground is no longer manufactured. It's now something completely different, which may or may not meet the needs of the HOA. So our suggestion to the council will be to please allow the HOA to work with the developer to perhaps set the budget and allow both of us to select the best product for their budget that they put aside for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll start with Councilman McComber.
Great. Again, I can echo the comments. The reduction in density is a wonderful thing. Clap, 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 cheer, cheer, cheer. Okay, now let's move on. So obviously, having the open space, I have no problem working with the HOA and putting that as a condition, because sometimes our stipulations can be very strict and you have to do certain things. By putting that as a condition, working with them, we had a lot of success. Councilwoman Barch and I had a lot of success in the park that went in up in the benches by working with developers, getting matching funds, working with the manufacturer, and it ended up being 3 times the park that it was originally planned to be. So you'll probably get a lot more of park this way. So absolutely have no problem there. In terms of trees, I do have a little bit of a issue here. The reason why the evergreens, and I get that, and I've done a lot of research on this because I have a home, I've been planting trees, and I was having issues with my evergreens, and I did a lot of research, and everyone always said, oh, it's our soil, it's our soil. And in reality, I found out recently that it's not. It is actually mites. It's spider mites killing the trees, because Eagle Mountain, Saratoga Springs, and West Lehigh all have it. And there's some amazing soils in Lehigh. But we have a really bad spider mite problem on the west side of the valley. And a simple treatment on the trees, and all of my evergreens are doing absolutely amazing. And so I would encourage, I was actually going to tell staff about this. I found this out this week, well, 2 weeks ago. But putting in the condition, you maybe as the HOA can work with the developer that they do this treatment, or they prepay for 3 years of treatment or something to make sure. But and also many of your locust trees are attacked by spider mites, and that's why they are dying prematurely sometimes on others. The honey locust is repellent to spider mites, but many of the other locusts aren't, and that's why they tend to die. So it's absolutely amazing, because they said the reason why is because there were a lot of spiders on the west side, and what did everyone do? Hired pest control companies, and they're killing all the spiders that eat the spider mites in the trees, and so now there's this huge problem. So, and yeah, it's just absolutely crazy. So I would recommend going down that path, because technically even if the tree does die, you have to replace it with another evergreen based on how the code works, and so you're gonna have to do it anyway. So to be successful, I would really strongly recommend that. And I've shared it with my neighbors. We had 3 trees that were looking all burnt, because that's the appearance they get from the spider mites. In fact, Jimmy Quatas, I'll just bring that up because we've been helping take care of it, and so I had my guy go over there and spray their trees, and all of their evergreens are surviving now. And they were literally almost dead. So the trees are really are robust if they have a fighting chance. Other than that, I'm looking at some of the setbacks and other things. I don't have a problem with that, especially because of the reduction in density. That's why I'm willing to give that leniency, because typically I'm a setback Nazi a little bit, because that's what you get, that sense of open space, but you've accomplished that through your park, a real sense of community open space that's usable open space, not just I'm taking all this linear space and calling that all my open space, one of our little loopholes that we have in our open space. And so that's the reason why I'm justifying that reduction. So thank you very much.
Councilwoman Barch? Oh, sorry, Jeff.
Sorry, I was just going to point out one thing since you're talking about the park, just to clarify a little bit. Sarah had mentioned the strange irregularities of the phasing, whatnot. If you pull it back up, and Mike can note, we do have some various ownerships, 2 ownerships that we're trying to work with through that issue. But just to note, we do have a phase 2 that has been drafted, and we're actually having a meeting for the pre-submittal hearing, pre-submittal meeting tomorrow. It'll actually include both phase 2 and phase 3 as phase 2.
So it eliminates this issue.
It eliminates that issue.
Great.
I just didn't want that to be a...
I didn't really care, because technically your phasing can all happen at one time too. You could just develop it all in the same time if you wanted to. We just got a kick out of it because we've had some funny phase pictures up here, Pat, and different layouts of streets that have made us laugh over the years. So, so yeah, I appreciate that clarification. But really, that nice big park there in the middle takes away all my concerns with your setbacks. And I think actually where you're putting your setback reductions makes sense too. It's logical. It wasn't out of, sometimes we see out of greed. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Barch?
Totally agree with Councilman McComber on the setbacks and why we would approve those. I appreciate the dramatic reduction in the unit count. Also, just a comment on 2 items that I would like to see as conditions. One would be on the garages. So we've got only a 20-foot setback on the front, but I would like to see the garages to the full 25 like we usually do, so that we have the ability to have cars actually parked in the driveways and not hanging over the sidewalks. So that's one thing that I would like to see pushed. And then the other thing would be on the placement of driveways. So that's twofold. First of all, on those corner lots, a condition that the driveways have to be the furthest away from the intersection as possible. And then secondly, that the driveways ideally be placed on the least trafficked road. So for example, if you're looking at, so for example, if you're looking at lot 10458, you'd want to put the driveway onto Peregrine and not onto Swainson, those kinds of things, where you're going to have the least amount of interference at higher speeds. So those are the only two items I have there. I appreciate the opportunity to have you guys come in and make its product better, so thank you.
Councilman Podeska?
Yeah, so living in this area, we've seen various plans come through, and I do like the fact that, well, I did have a hang up a little bit about the rear setback being 15 feet. Just the fact that neighborhood 11, the preserves, has a 20-foot setback, and I drive past that every day, and it looks tight and small. But looking at the layout that you have here, we don't have any houses back to back. They're all going to open space or to wildlife or a road, yeah. and so we don't have that stacking of the backyard. So I appreciate that design. Let's see. Yeah, I do want to see the ability for the HOA to work with the developer on the playground equipment and planning there. So it gets actually things installed that's going to actually be used. And then the last item I had was the reasoning for Hawk Drive exiting out to wildlife at that point. One concern I have about that is all the lots at the northeast corner would more than likely be doing U-turns coming off of Redwood to get into that community. So I was just wondering the question behind that, instead of having it to commercial way across that kind of intersection there on wildlife.
Can I explain why that choice was made? Would that help you?
Yeah.
So currently, there's actually there's already a sewer and a storm drain line running through there. That's fairly significant for all the neighborhoods that are actually up above. So the corridor would probably remain regardless of whether the access was there or not. It worked best for that use, but that was the primary reason for locating that, because we'd have to provide the easement and access to those utilities.
Okay.
That's what the reason is.
So it had to be moved down further. So yeah, I guess it's just the traffic flow concern. You know, it's not high volume, but I do see kind of those, I don't know, 15 lots in that kind of area that would be, it's a quicker route for them to do a U-turn on wildlife to get into that Hawk Drive. That's all I have.
Councilman Porter?
I'm probably going to just say what everybody's already said. So the reduction in density is great, and hey, I won't ask for a second round of applause, but
thank you.
And yeah, I think the setbacks I can accept because of that reduction, and as well as what was touched on, where you don't have a lot of stacking of units right next to each other that don't border on each other, and so it alleviates some of that crowded feeling where you sometimes see with the setbacks. So the design and the reduction in density both lend to that. I'll be honest, I hadn't noticed the issue with Hawkway and the median, but I can understand your reasoning, and so that's unfortunate, but that's, that sometimes happens. And I think because if it was a much larger neighborhood, it would be a much bigger issue for me. But it is a limited number of homes, and even as small as this is, going up to Swainson and coming down that way isn't that much further. I can't make a U-turn in my truck, so I would end up going all the way up the road anyway. Yeah, just go over the median. I'm not encouraging that. So, but yeah, I'm glad to see it. And yes, on the playground, I would say that it would be great to work with the HOA, having been in a situation where we kind of got stuck in the situation where the developer kind of sold one thing and ended up giving us another, and I think working with the HOA will make everybody happy. So that's good.
Fine with, you know, if you're setting a budget, working that out with the HOA, letting them pick those type of things, whatever, how that condition works, I don't know exactly, maybe whatever budget it takes to put in what you suggest. Or more.
Well, we've done other things too before with our different parks. Like, for example, this is a 1-platform playground or a 2-platform playground, along with, you know, there are different ways to do it.
So, I think staff, you can figure that out while you're texting.
I got it.
I just lost a vote. Anyway, where was I going? So anyway, HOA, working with them, that's good. As far as the setbacks go, reduction density and a better, more higher quality open spaces is one of the things where I'm willing to accept variances that better the community. That's going there. As far as the evergreens, I haven't done a lot of research on evergreens. I presume they'd need to be warranted or whatnot, whatever the majority of the council. Okay, it's code, but if you could work with the HOA to protect them with warranties, treatment, or whatnot, that would, excuse me, that would be good. All I have.
Yeah, I just had a follow-up. One of the things that I thought of is along the homes, but 10 homes or whatever that back along wildlife there. If you can, and this is just a suggestion, obviously I can't mandate this, but maybe the HOA, you can work with the HOA too, when you're looking at the architecture on the back of those. Simple things like shutters on some, a little bit of changes here and there to make it a little bit nicer from that back road. The other areas, they're backed on other homes, they're backed on other lots, it's different. But when you're driving up, especially with only a 15-foot setback, and you're driving up that road and it's house.
Yeah,
Even
roof
sometimes
pitch
when
or
our
something.
front elevations are very different because the house plans are different, sometimes the backs are very monotonous.
Yeah, this is actually came up during the planning commission as well. So
Excellent.
So it was a good discussion.
Excellent. Okay.
Hopefully that's something we can address.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. With that, I'll entertain a motion.
I will move that we approve Fox Hollow Neighborhood 10, Hawks Estate, Phase 1 preliminary and final plats, Scott McCord applicant, southeast corner of Wildlife Boulevard and Swainson Avenue, with all staff findings and conditions, adding in the condition that the front setback to the garage be 25 foot instead of the 20, and that the driveways on corners be furthest away from the intersection as possible. Does that make sense?
Can we add working with the HOA on the playground?
That's on there.
It's already on there.
Oh, okay.
Just
I'll
really
second.
small.
Okay. I have a first from Councilwoman Barch. I have a second from Councilman McComber.
That was Wilton.
Wilden. Phew. Yeah, Councilman Wilden. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Okay, we'll do a roll call. Councilwoman Barch.
Aye.
Podeska. Aye. Wilden.
Aye.
McComber.
Aye.
Porter.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Okay, since we're on a roll on business items, let's start with business item 1, certification of August 15th, 2017 primary election canvass. Do I have a motion?
I move that we approve the certification of the August 15th, 2017 primary election canvass resolution R17-84 dated delay.
I'll second.
I have a first from Councilman McComber, a second from Councilwoman Barch. Any further discussion?
Just that it was run very poorly.
Yeah, the county's got a lot of things to fix.
Yep.
Yes. Okay. Mark, forward that on to the county. I will do a roll call. Councilman Podeska.
Aye.
Wilden.
Aye.
McComber.
Aye.
Barch.
Aye.
Councilman Porter stepped out and was absent for the vote. Bid award professional services agreement with CRS Engineering for the design and construction management of sewer projects S1.3, S2.1, S2.2, and N1 for the amount of $151,850. Resolution R17-86.
Mayor and Council, we've discussed these projects a couple times previously, particularly at the retreat. Several of them are identified as being programmed this year in our sewer impact fees facilities plan. The only new project added to this list was an extension to get the sewer installed in front of Smith's Marketplace extended south out of the way of the future CFI before that construction takes place. So otherwise that would increase the cost of that in the future. We had to cut up that expanded road. Other than that, the other three projects we've discussed previously, it makes a lot of sense to bundle these all together so that we can look at the funding options for these when we get some engineering. I get some better numbers about what kind of costs we'd be looking at. So unless you have any other questions.
Okay. Other questions? I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move that we approve the professional services agreement with CRS Engineering for the design and construction management of sewer projects S13, S2, S22, and N1 for the amount of $151,850. Resolution R1786 dated today.
I'll second.
I have a first from Councilman Wilden, a second from Councilwoman Barch. Any further discussion on the motion? We'll do a roll call. Porter?
Aye.
Barch?
Aye.
Tedesca?
Aye.
McComber?
Aye.
Wilden?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. We have item number 5, the contract ratification of RB&G Engineering for an engineering design and construction documents for future construction of Riverside Drive from Pioneer Crossing to Brookshire Drive. Resolution R17-87 to help the residents of Dalmore Meadows.
Mayor and Council, you authorized me to move forward with this. We're just looking for your ratification on this vote.
Okay.
I move that we approve the contract ratification for RB&G Engineering, Inc. for engineering design and construction documents for future construction on Riverside Drive from Pioneer Crossing to Brookshire Drive, Resolution R17 dated today, 87 dated today.
We have a first from Councilman McComber, a second from Councilman Wilden. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Councilman Porter?
Aye.
Barch?
Aye.
McComber?
Aye.
Wilden?
Aye.
Tedesca?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Mark, thank you to the staff for moving this quickly for those residents.
Appreciate that too.
Approval of minutes. I had one change I noticed on my second time going through there on 8/22/17, line 106. We put Councilman Porter, and it was Councilman Porter and Commissioner Wilkinson. Did the interviewing. So I didn't catch that the first time. Okay, is there any other changes other than those that were posted?
I move that we approve the minutes for August 22nd and August 29th of this year. With the changes that were presented today.
Second.
We have a first from Councilman McComber, a second from Councilman Porter. Any further discussion on the motion? Tedesca?
Aye.
Wilden?
Aye.
McComber?
Aye.
Barch?
Aye.
Porter?
Aye.
Mark, you were?
Yes. Public hearing number 1.
Yes. We are getting there. We are holding off.
This was a total tease, Council. Sorry.
Yes. As we had discussed before, Mark, is staff ready so we're not writing code on the fly, or do we need to move this item?
I think we're there. But you can be the judge of that.
Okay. Council, this drags on as discussed, so we're not writing code on the fly, so we can be more thorough in our code writing. If this is going to drag on a long time, we will table this for a future meeting so that we can make sure we get all corrections made appropriately. Okay.
Okay, the changes that you're seeing are related to regional parks, more specifically our sports park. However, this applies to any future regional parks as well. So they are defined as parks of 20 acres or more. We've updated that definition, and we've also included updates to the definition for public and private utility buildings and facilities. For landscaping, there is a requirement in the code that we cannot exceed 70% turf, and we want to add that this does not apply to parks in general, not just regional parks, but parks. Parking, there is a requirement to screen parking lots that face streets with either a hedge, I guess a berm, or a wall, okay. And there is a recommended change that be allowed to be screened with intermittent planter beds. That was not submitted by that was not approved by the Planning Commission. However, we would like to discuss that further. There are changes related to lighting. for regional parks, that they can have theme lighting that can be taller than 10 feet, that the height of sports field lighting was increased from 70 feet to 80 feet. The temperature for sports field lighting was increased from 4,000 K to 4,200 K. And then there's language added to related to walkway theming. For site and architectural design standards, we have the same requirement repeated in the parking section related to screening. And then there is language added to signs due to the proposed sign in the regional park. What it does is it allows the signage to be reviewed and approved through the process. It allows logos on backstops, allows sponsor plaques, and allows electronic scoreboards without a permit. The other signs need a permit, the scoreboards don't.
Councilwoman Barth? Oh, public hearing. Is anybody here for Title 19? Okay, seeing no comments, I will close the public hearing portion of the Title 19. I don't think in 7 years we've ever had anybody speak on a Title 19 public hearing. Yeah? That's right. That's right. Chickens, bees, squirrels. That is right. I was thinking that was some different engineering code. Okay. Okay.
Mayor?
Yes.
So just real briefly, when I was just reviewing this before the meeting, I noticed just a slight numbering issue, which actually could be corrected after the fact. But in 1906-09, it would be more appropriate to label, or at least to number that, instead of being 1, 2, 3, and 4, the first three should be 1, A, B, and C, and then the fourth one should be 2. So, sounds like that was already caught, so, okay, great.
Okay. March.
One item that is of concern, maybe it's not of concern to others, I don't know, that's not actually one of the changes. If you look at 2G artificial turf, it's just flat out not permitted. So that means if somebody wants to come in and put a putting green in, or a mini golf course, or a baseball field that's batting cages, things like that. Sure. So we need to allow for them in those kinds of scenarios, which goes to the fact that I still think that we're doing some of this very, very wrong, and that'll go back to fencing in a minute. A lot of these are actually part of an amenity. And I know Kimber was concerned about the fact that we'd get a scoreboard and nothing else. But if you make it part of this amenity is a regional ballpark versus this amenity is a little league ballpark versus whatever, then the regional baseball field has a backstop, which negates the need for fencing code. It has a scoreboard, which negates the need for the scoreboard part of the code, which has a outfield fence, which negates the need for the fencing code. All of these things are actually part of the amenity. So it's ridiculous that we're making code when we don't need to. So I have a serious problem with those. Again, artificial turf is not permitted as part of the landscaping, but if you've got this amenity, yes, a putting green can have artificial turf because it's part of the amenity.
Well, and baseball batting cages have
often
to have it. You will wear out the grass like crazy.
When we reviewed this, a particular one about no artificial turf is not permitted. So this section says that this is standards for required landscaping. So if there will be batting cages in the regional park, and the reason we didn't change this language is because the park exceeds any requirements or anything. So the batting
so
cages
along those
aren't
lines then, we don't need to do the whole
required
trees in the park strip
landscaping.
underneath the power lines, because those can be the additional landscaping. They don't have to be the required landscaping. Again, we're making code where we don't have to.
That was taken out.
So,
It's not that particular item you just mentioned isn't in here any longer.
okay, but it's the same theory. We're making code where we don't need to. So, fencing, again, I have a serious problem in that number 4 item of fencing, having this be part of the code, because do we want a homeowner to say, well, I'm putting a we want them to be able to have a sports court, which you can have, but if we say it's a fencing item and not consider it part of the amenity, it doesn't make any sense. We're just making codes we don't need to make.
So just a clarifying question, if I could. You're okay if a sports court has chain link fencing around it because it's part of that amenity?
Yeah.
In a private home?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just like you'd have chain link on a dog run because it's part of the amenity. It's part of that. It's not part of the fencing. It's not a fence specifically by code delineates a property line.
What if the sports court is on property?
Well, it has to be a certain distance away from the property in order to meet easements and everything else. Well, otherwise you have to get
An
PUE,
exemption.
you have to get waivers and stuff from utility companies and whatever else. Yeah. So this is just, and this is something I've brought up before, but I have to bring it up again. It doesn't make sense to write code where we don't need to write code. As far as the screening goes, the screening is another big one for me. This is the light screening on the parking lots. So I know that staff is concerned that, for example, at Neptune Park, we don't have that screening around Neptune, but we also have another set of parking stalls that points in toward the park and away from traffic, and so it blocks that already. You have the ability to not just do, when we talked about the sports complex in particular, we talked about the fact that it's got such a huge buffer between the parking area and the road because of the power line that we can't do away with, that the lights, some thought, wouldn't exceed that distance. That being said, we can use hedges, we can use bushes. To have an intermittent planter bed, I think actually makes it worse because then you get the flash, 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 flash as people are driving through and along those areas. So I think that we should just leave it as it is my personal opinion on that one.
Requiring the berm?
It's berm or shrubbery or wall. We've got options.
Well, and in this case, with us redesigning the park, since our last thing, we actually may be lower than the street. So if we're berming, we're actually...
Wouldn't need to, because it would be, if you're lower than the street already, that counts as part of your berm, right? It's blocking the lights. The whole purpose is to block the lights.
Yeah, but we also do have this, we do have on-street parking there, comparable to what we have in Neptune. So if the Neptune argument were made that we have on-street parking that would block the lighting restriction, then this would meet that categorization as well.
Yeah. And then on the plaques and sponsorship items in the sign ordinance for which signs are going to be allowed in regional parks, my only concern there is in BI is it says that is express approval from the city, and just out of curiosity I went to go look for the definition of city and we don't have one. So we actually need to make a definition for city, be it, otherwise who's actually approving it? So we just need to put that into the definitions and figure that out. Is that going to be, or change the word, is it going to be staff? Is it going to be Heston? Is it going to be Annalisa? Is it going to be council? Is it going to be planning commission, city manager? We just need to know who that's going to be.
Tell us right now what you want that to say.
Well, in some scenarios, it absolutely should be Annalisa and Heston because they are looking at who is actually putting forward the sponsorship and who's paying money. So you could just say staff, I guess. I don't think that's something.
Let's get more specific. Let's say city manager. Let's
city
say
manager
planning
or
director.
designee, because then you can say who it's going to be.
As
Does this roll
delegated
up-
by city manager.
Just roll up under the assistant city manager?
Just say city manager or designate.
Okay, so there we go. So that's on 2BI, and I don't know which section that's actually in. Because 1918 13 2I. 2BI. Did you find out where that was, Sarah? Found that okay?
Am I changing it now, or am
It
I
might be.
bringing this back?
That's a pretty easy change. It depends on whether the rest of the council agrees with me on whether things are an amenity or we actually need to write the code. I think it's whether or not we bring it back. Those are my only changes.
What
So-
was it? Sorry, 19.
So it's 1918, 13 under parks and trails signage and standards under 2, actually all of 2. It's wherever it says that the it's going to be approved by the city. So 2BI, 2BII, 2CI, yeah, those areas where it says to be approved by the city. The city doesn't exist in our definition. So it doesn't. Yes, it is, yeah. So those are pretty easy changes to make for us today here. If the rest of the council doesn't care about the whole amenity or not amenity thing, then that's up to them. But those are my items.
Okay.
Someone.
Councilman McComber.
So the whole amenity argument, it does have merit. I think that a lot of work has been done. I think that I'd like to get this in place as we move forward, but it could be something that we can always come back and just strike a lot of this stuff if we had to. But I think one of the key things is I just want to make sure that we're not just creating, a false, the city gets extra benefits over someone else. It's truly amenities that we're creating, and that's what Councilman Barch is saying. If we can do it through code, fine. If we can do it through amenity and that makes it cleaner, then I would maybe prefer that. I think I'm going with Councilman Barch if it can be cleaner, unless we're picking who can do what. So that's something that you can discuss with Kevin. What do you think? What he thinks is also agrees with what is in terms of picking one group over another, getting certain preferences. So I think that's what you're getting at, because we're creating all of these exceptions for the city, and then that makes it look like we don't want to follow our own code. When in fact, all we're trying to do is make an awesome amenity for people. So if you guys discuss that and you come back and say, you know what, even though you guys approve this, we're just going to nix all this stuff and call it an amenity and change it later, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, we can do that. On that topic, we can just take the last few words within a public or private park, and then it applies to everyone.
But again, it goes back to, so okay, even along with that, if I can express
please,
this, I will try to express this. Even with that, if we look at our amenities and we're trying to create this point system for the developers, and I'm going to use baseball because that's what we're talking about most right now. The baseball field at Harvest, where it's a grass field and it has a backstop, is very different than the baseball field at the sports complex.
With graded infields.
With graded infields and a scoreboard and a scorekeeper's tower and a backstop and a dugout and batting cages. So if you're looking at, if Mount Saratoga, and they're not going to do this in this location, but if they want to come in and build a sports complex style baseball field and still only get points of the field in Harvest or the field at Sunrise Meadows, that doesn't make any sense. If they're going to come in, or if we have a company that wants to come in and improve things and make a facility, an indoor facility or something like that, those should be part of that amenity. It's not just a matter of making sure, because we have to make sure that it's equitable for both us as a city to the public that's going to be possibly doing the same kinds of amenities, but we also have to make sure that the amenities are what they are. We also can't have somebody come in and get points for a sports field type complex and yet go, oh yeah, but we're not going to do a scoreboard, or we're not going to do a scorekeeper's tower, or we're not going to do, yeah, maybe we won't do, batting cages or whatever it is. It has to be apples to apples, and we can't get that unless we do it as an amenity, and this is what this amenity means, and this is what this amenity means.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure, I do understand your comments. I think what's being proposed in here was based off of feedback as the park was coming through and related to what's in our code now. Some of the things that you're suggesting are bigger picture items that would need some bigger revamping. And if you're saying that you don't feel it's needed because it's an amenity and it's a part of an amenity, that's fine, we can strike the change as well. It's just that this particular section is so specific, and chain link has been such a big topic in the city that it was, identifying that within that specificity that it could be allowed around sports fields. So it was actually meant to appease past comments related to chain link fencing, not to make it more complicated. However, I do understand your comments.
But I'm hearing what Councilman Barch is saying is also you'd be fine with chain link fence in dog runs, in...
We do already.
Right, but
and that is spelled out in the code. I mean, this
Yeah.
right here says you can have it if it's for chickens or bees or dog runs, or, you know what I mean? The code is that specific with chain link.
So I guess the point that I'm going for is I see where you're wanting to go with this. I think it's going to be vastly more complex than just this. What we would really love from a recommendation standpoint is if we can make changes to this so that the council can approve this, so that we can bid the park and get charging forward, then I would like to have the planning department work with you specifically to look for ways that we can reach the aims that you're looking for and do it in such a way that we've captured the essence of what you're doing, I think, and this is a staff blind spot, if you would. We're really concerned about anything that allows chain link, because we've had so much conversation and things like that. And so if you can help work with us on creating the amenity package, and kind of, I like the concept that you're going for. I just think if we could spend a little time trying to really get our mind around it and draft the section of code that allows for the amenity packages to do what you're talking about. So for example, in a putting green, allowing for artificial turf in that, and you know, we're carving this specific carve out in code because we've said in the last year or two we don't allow any artificial turf or fake grass or, you know, simulated, you know, lawn product or whatever we're calling it. We've gotten so specific in some of those areas. From a staff perspective, we're trying to say, okay, how can we put it in the batting cage and not go contrary to where we've said thou shalt not, you know, allow for this in other spots. So if we can work with you on that amenity package, I think that concept is intriguing, and I'm hoping that we can craft something that maybe may negate some of these things in the near future. I don't think that we've been looking at it necessarily broad enough to capture what you've been talking about, and I think that that's a good direction for us to work on.
Okay, so if I could just, are you finished? Okay. So one of the things with the lighting situation and the berming, I totally get where you're coming from, and some of these are such long stretches that it almost can make the project cost prohibitive. So one thing I like is on the utility boxes, we have a phrase in here, and I'm wondering if we can use it, because it says here, dense vegetation buffers, which include an evergreen variety of plant materials, shall be placed where appropriate to screen all utility boxes and pedestals in order to maintain attractive during the winter months. So could we do something where appropriate, so we can actually have where, like Mark says, there's parking stalls. Well, then it's not appropriate. But maybe there's the break in parking stalls. We should put vegetation where there's the break in the parking stalls. So we then are given that ability to solve the problem without locking us into these expensive projects. So I just think that as a city council, we're very much on top of these types of things. And so as the developer, I think here where appropriate makes sense, where it doesn't always make sense when we're talking to people coming in to develop the project. So I was just wondering if we can say where appropriate on the lighting.
One of the things we've done in the past is we've tried to avoid language like that, because when it's ambiguous, it leaves it up for so much discussion, because everybody has a different opinion about what's appropriate.
But then we're the developer. Yeah, and so as long as you have 3 people thinking it's appropriate, then you'd probably have the decision. We have it in here already under utility boxes, because it doesn't make sense to have like the sound box covered in vegetation, so that you can't get in there to get to the sound equipment for a guy to walk out or a gal to walk out with a microphone and welcome everyone out onto the field, right? For a first pitch or something, right? So I think it makes sense. But
I'm okay with it when this zone or what we're doing is very specific, what we're trying to do. So it's not, we're not opening up.
Let me give probably a little bit of background on this particular change might be helpful. So when we were reviewing the park, the sports complex park plan, there's a lot of frontage on 400 North, and there's a large landscape area between the road and the parking lot. However, if we were to look at a berm, it was adding massive amounts of dirt to meet the requirement for a 3-to-1 berm, and that's a cost. And it's not to say, the question is, when we're looking at regional parks in general, not just for the city, but for anybody who builds regional parks, is that a cost that we see as a large benefit to the particular park or to the abutting street or things like that? And are there other ways that it can be addressed without having such a heavy cost, such as bringing in truckloads of dirt to create a berm?
So in this, how many regional parks are other developers going to build, really?
Not many, if any.
Yeah, we were going to.
But in theory, let's say a Real wanted to locate a sports complex down here. That could be something that would trigger it. I think in this case, though, I think this is a very unique case, because the question is do we spend $100,000 creating a berm all along 400, or does the development across the street go with private fences, privacy fences, like they'd probably like to do,
like they're already doing,
and resolve the issue, and save us the cost of having to build that. So in this particular case, there's probably a case that could be made that there's already going to be a treatment that will resolve the homes being shined on.
That's what I'm getting at. That's what I'm saying. Just say where appropriate.
Right. But we can't go arbitrary and capricious, and Kevin did want to comment on that particular topic.
Well, but it's already in here, arbitrary and capricious, so obviously you don't agree because it's already in here and you've already presented for us to approve.
We have, however, over the last several years tried to remove ambiguous language like that.
You just added some, so.
Yeah, so just, the courts have said that there aren't any standards, and where you have language where it leaves it up to the complete discretion of the administrative. Remember, you're an administrative body when you're acting on a land use application. That is the equivalent of an arbitrary capricious decision.
So what if we say instead of where appropriate, where necessary to block light spillover from the parking lot or something like that?
Yeah, perfect. That's a clear black and white standard. So I don't know, I guess I'd noticed too, I thought we had a definition of regional park. Doesn't look like we do. Are we taking that from, where are we borrowing that definition from?
It's in there.
In where?
In the draft code amendments that are proposed tonight.
I mean,
I missed that.
I'm sorry. I know that I'm being a little bit picky or a little bit rude today, but I just think it's so interesting when you guys pick to be arbitrary and capricious. I'm reading through here, and there is so much arbitrary and capricious language in this. I don't think I can vote for this because my attorney says that I shouldn't vote for things that are arbitrary and capricious. Define public view.
Mark, the question I have then is, it doesn't sound like the council's ready to move forward on this. It's going to hold up the bid for the park. We do that piece as an alternate. Berm alt A1 or something.
So it doesn't have.
It doesn't have to be a berm.
And so that's really kind of what we're going for. The challenge is do we want to give flexibility in sports complexes, whether it's public or private, to reach the same ends through different means? And that's really the question that we're trying to present. And so if you're comfortable with this, then yes, the sports complex would meet the code. If you're not comfortable with this, or if we table it again, then no, we don't. We aren't meeting that specific requirement. And theoretically, we don't quite have the elevations worked out yet to determine if the road will be higher than the parking lot. But it does say we shall create a berm, or other means right now. So again, that's kind of where we're stuck a little.
So
bit.
I guess why are you guys arguing and pushing back so much on the solution? I was trying to give you guys an out, and then you guys threw it under the bus. I literally was trying to get you guys an ability to move forward without your berm, and to appease Councilwoman Barch because she had the concern. I got nods from her, and as soon as I said it, you guys are like, "Oh, you can't be arbitrary and capricious when I'm reading through this whole thing that you are."
So,
I don't get it.
I mean, Mark, back to it. Will this hold up the bid?
I think we should pass this. We can.
I think
the only couple arguments you have are being resolved.
Yeah, I think that I think that at this point we're getting close to putting it back out to bid. We would want for sure this to be approved prior to awarding bid. But again, I don't want to have to go through a redesign if there's something that's potentially going to hang us up. And so if this isn't going to hang us up and you still want more time to work on it, that's fine. But prior to awarding the contract, we'll need to have a resolution on this.
Councilman Wilden?
I would just suggest we use the language that Council Member Barch suggested, and then if it becomes a problem later, then it's our part. our fault
Record show
for
that.
approving it, not staff. So I appreciate your guys' feedback. And I just want to make sure we don't have to pay for a room. So whatever it takes to do that, because that'd be a little bit silly. And I appreciate Councilwoman Barch's comments. I think what she's trying to get at is less code and give residents more freedom, which I'm all in favor with. So I would support whatever initiative in the long term. Hopefully not like in years, but you know.
So the site plan.
So I would just, I'm fine with everything, including the comments that Councilman Barch suggested. Are you? I mean,
absolutely.
It was a variation of
I mean, basically, it says she basically gave 5 more words to where appropriate, but So I think we should probably
sounds like
change the
so
wording.
far we're 3 good. Councilman Podeska?
Yeah, no, I like the direction that's going as far as with the current code. I too like the idea of exploring amenity variances there, or categories. It reminded me a little bit about the various amphitheaters that we're looking at back then. They had, was it like A through D, and those all had different categories of what events could be there, what amenities they had with it, and it's all just kind of grouped together in that title or category. Just a couple things I wanted to add. I wanted to be respected to the Planning Commission. That's what I was looking for. On a few things that they wanted clarifications on. They had in 19.18.13, they wanted guidelines for logos on the back of the signs and not just approval. And so I wanted clarifications as far as past discussions that you guys have had about the logos, what maybe they're looking for. I couldn't really find that in the documentation. The second thing was also they wanted changing of the word feathering to transitioning or graduating. And I wasn't familiar with what's commonly accepted term. I know we've used feathering for ages, so I don't know why they'd be asking for that change at this time.
Mascot's a bird.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
fine with whatever steps.
And so it seems like feathering has been kind of traditionally used, so I guess my direction for them would sticking with that. And as far as logos on the back, I would just need more clarification on what they were looking for their clarification. That's all I have.
Porter? I'm fine with the necessary language that was suggested by Councilwoman Barch. Yeah, I mean the main issue was to avoid the added cost of having to berm it. And so if we can, whatever language makes people comfortable with avoiding that, that's fine. And then open a whole nother can of worms here, but under 1918-03, the definitions, we have a definition for electronic message sign that we're doing, excluding scoreboards from sports fields. But at the bottom it says where copy changes more frequently than once per 24-hour period. I believe that we had changed that to 1 hour in the discussion, I think June or whatever, whenever we discussed this last. And so I was just wondering why and maybe I'm recalling it incorrectly, so. Well, it was a separate discussion. We were talking about gas stations and stuff.
For hours.
Apparently.
A long game. That's my council meeting.
Somebody throw something at him. He's too far away. All right. Well, anyway, so that was if we table that, then that's fine. I'll have to go back and look at that. Yeah, it says excluding scoreboards, so we'll be able to change the score slightly more frequently, hopefully. But yeah, so I just, I think I understand Councilwoman Barch's, and I think that maybe that is the right way to go. However, I'd like to move forward with this so that we can get this park built sometime before my children are in high school.
I do have another. Okay. So on, what is it, 12? It's 19-18-05-12. It says scoreboards within regional parks, no electronic advertising is permitted. Only the score may be displayed electronically. That's a little arbitrary and capricious, because what about like a beverage company that might want lighting behind it on that board? But technically, that is electronic, because there's electricity lighting the back of that sign.
I hear you though.
Yes.
I'm just, because this doesn't say that. This just says
Leave
no
it even hanging.
electronic advertising is permitted. I know what we were getting at. I know what the intent behind this was, but I'm just trying to make a point tonight, because I just think it's interesting how when we selectively pick and choose. But I just want to make sure that that beverage company will be able to light their sign from behind, because that will be a deal killer for them to pay for.
As long as they only light it once every 24 hours.
Yeah.
Okay. Wilden's made whole now.
Can I ask a clarification?
No.
So if passing this tonight, do you want to, in 1906, 09, the fencing area, do you want to take out the exception of public or private park so that residents can put a sports court in their backyard, or do you not want to do that tonight and wait for the amenity stuff?
You want us to come back and address that? If you would like us to come back and address that, let us fit that in elsewhere.
This is just for the sports complex, then we can just address that when we talk about amenities, et cetera.
Right.
So we'll leave it, okay.
I would agree.
Perfect. Kevin, really?
So
I think we should make Ryan.
I
make
looked
the
at the packet one more time, and I couldn't find that definition for regional park. I know the planning commission considered it. I'm just asking the question, where in the packet is that? Because I just want to make sure that when Nikki goes to publish this ordinance, that there isn't going to be an issue with that being left out.
I thought we already did it. So it's
Was
not
that part of our last
It
code
was
change?
probably on one of the other sheets that got tabled, so I'll just bring it back later. We have code amendments coming in 2 weeks.
It's a
Okay.
shocker.
Perfect. And when I say just, and I'll have a conversation after the meeting with Councilman McComber, but when I use the term, I mean, these are ugly words, arbitrary and capricious. Those have actual legal definitions. So, I mean, it sounds bad, but I'm not implying that you were
Let's take that one off
capricious.
line. Reporter's down here.
But we
dying
have
to
that
make a
language in
motion.
here.
I move that we approve the code amendments to Title 19, multiple sections, regional parks, ordinance 17-26, dated today, with staff findings and conditions, and changing the language regarding the firming to include where necessary.
A reasonable screening. You said reasonable screening for
Reason-
light spillage. And spillage.
There you go.
And that also includes the delegation of the sign authority?
And delegating sign approval authority to the city manager or his designee.
Or
Her.
designee.
Or designee.
Just don't say it.
Sorry.
Pronoun.
It's
Okay.
Or designee.
Their
The
designee.
grammar police have had their chance.
Anything else? Did I miss anything?
I have a first from Councilman Porter.
Second.
I have a second from Councilman Podeska. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Okay. We'll do a roll call. Porter,
Aye.
Podeska,
Aye.
Barch,
Aye.
Wilden,
Aye.
McComber.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Mark, do we have need of closed session this evening? Okay, I will entertain a motion.
So made.
I have a first from
Second.
Councilman McComber, a second from Councilwoman Barch. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. We will take a 5-minute recess. Yeah, just at a time.
Good, how are you?